Chapter 1361. Everyone was blinded by Xiao Bai's performance. Even Bufang was a little surprised. This was a classic example of using a small trick to win a big trick. His courage, eyesight, and perseverance were all at the peak. No one had thought that Xiao Bai would be so cunning as to steal Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's precious source stone. Of course, it was also because Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had lost her mind because of her sudden outburst. But it was undeniable that even Bufang couldn't help but give Xiao Bai a thumbs up in praise. What was even more exciting was that, after Whitey took the precious source stone, it let out a mocking laugh and stuffed the source stone into its own stomach. Xiao Bai's performance was refreshing and unpretentious. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but nod in admiration. Suddenly, a roar rang out. The 12 spider legs smashed the ground in a frenzy, shattering the ground and piercing holes in it. When each spear-like spider leg swept across the void, it caused the void to crack. It was very terrifying. After Xiao Bai ate the source stone wrapped in golden threads, the light in his mechanical eyes kept changing. Then, he dragged his body, which was riddled with holes, and ran in Bufang's direction. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch flew into a rage. With the golden source stone taken away, her chest became empty. Golden threads fell down, and the wiggling golden threads on her face faded away. Crazy killing intent surged. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch chased after Xiao Bai like a madman, trying to get the golden source stone back. The golden source stone was Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's secret, the secret of the Nether Puppeteer clan. They couldn't afford to lose it. In the distance, Tian Song, who was trapped in the spider web, felt the pressure on his body shatter in an instant, as if the shackles that bound him were broken. His eyes suddenly lit up. Then, flames seemed to surge in his eyes. There was a tearing noise. The spider web was instantly torn apart by him. They turned into densely packed fragments and scattered all over the ground. Boom! A terrifying aura erupted from his body. He raised his hand. A suction force exploded from his hand. Hades' arrow was stunned. When he saw the bent Hades' halberd, he immediately flew towards Hades' Tenzang. There was a loud bang. It was captured by Hades' Tenzang. Little Huss, let me borrow your Hades' halberd. Hades' Tenzang said lightly. His voice resounded in the sky. When Hades' arrow heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. He stood up, flicked his hair, patted his chest, and said, Dad, feel free to use it. Hades' halberd has been maintained very well. It's just that it was accidentally bent just now. Gay. Hades' Tenzang twitched the corner of his mouth, looking a little cold and arrogant. It's fine if it's bent. I just have to straighten it out again. As soon as he finished speaking, Tian Song grabbed the Hades' halberd and slowly exerted force. In the blink of an eye, he straightened the Hades' halberd. The straightened Hades' halberd regained its terrible power. With the weapon that had accompanied Tian Song to Nether Prison in his hand, his power seemed to have increased a lot. Looking at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch in the distance, Tian Song narrowed his eyes. His figure crossed the sky and appeared in a flash. Hades' halberd swept out. Swoosh! The oppressive sound of something piercing through the air shook heaven and earth, shaking the hearts of those who heard it. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch sensed the aura. Suddenly, a spider leg thrust out. With a ripping sound, it seemed to pierce a big hole in the void. With a rumble, it collided with Hades' halberd. Without the golden source stone, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's aura seemed to be much weaker. Struck by Hades' halberd, he kept retreating. Is that all you can do? Tian Song said coldly. Holding the Nether King halberd, he gently swept it across, swung it in an arc, and smashed it toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch mercilessly. The suppression on his puppet body was gone. Hades' Tenzang was not afraid at all. He was not in a hurry. Instead, he smashed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch again and again, forcing him to retreat. In the distance, Xiao Bai had run back to Bufang's side. Seeing Xiao Bai's appearance, Bufang sucked in a cold breath. His appearance could indeed be said to be miserable. At the very least, his body was covered with holes, and there seemed to be lightning arcs jumping in them. To an ordinary person, every blow was deadly. But to Xiao Bai, it did not seem to be a big deal. His mechanical eyes flashed as if he was still immersed in the joy of getting the source stone. Bufang did not know whether to laugh or cry. He found that Xiao Bai seemed to be more and more human-like. In the past, Xiao Bai was so cold and arrogant that people called him the clothes-stripping maniac. But now Xiao Bai, alas, it was hard to explain. He was as happy as a 300-pound fatty even when he was stripping a stone. However, Bufang was also a little puzzled. Ordinary puppets might not be able to operate after being stabbed a few times like this, even the Earth Nether puppet. That was because these puppets needed a puppet heart to operate. Once the puppet heart was destroyed, it meant that the puppet would lose the ability to control it. But Xiaobai did not seem to fit this concept. Looking at the dense holes on his body, there were at least 100 of them. He had been stabbed by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch more than 100 times. But Xiaobai was still alive and kicking. That was the problem. What exactly was Xiao Bai's puppet heart? How could it make Xiao Bai as strong as a cockroach? He patted Xiao Bai's round belly. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. Then he stood where he was. His mechanical eyes dimmed, and he remained motionless as if he had sunk into the process of digesting the source stone. Bufang knew that the source stone was definitely a good thing. It could drive Nether Puppeteer Patriarch crazy and make him the benchmark for countless puppet hearts. It must have a great background. And Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's puppets always exuded a sense of technology. Perhaps it had something to do with this source stone. Bufang was quite familiar with Xiao Bai's state. It should be an evolutionary state. Bufang did not know how long this state would last. But thinking about it, it would probably take some time. And this time, Bufang could watch Hades Tenzang torture Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. When Hades Tenzang was suppressed, Bufang guessed that it had something to do with Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. After all, Tian Song's fleshly body, the heavenly Nether Puppet, was made by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. The so-called Nether Puppeteer heart should come from the Golden Source Stone, so it was normal for him to be suppressed. However, Xiao Bai's godlike teammate had done something miraculous in an impossible situation. He had taken away the Golden Source Stone. With that, Hades Tenzang was freed from the shackles again. His fighting strength had recovered, and he had become even more irritable. Perhaps it was because he had been suppressed for too long that he felt a little humiliated. He was trapped in a spider's web and could not break free. If it weren't for Xiao Bai's divine creation, no one knew what would have happened. If Bufang's head had been blown off by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's spear, Tian Song was so angry that he had to crawl to the toilet wall and cry. It was a tragic thing to see a salted fish that had finally turned over. That was why Tian Song was so angry that he even used the Hades halberd. He was much more irritable than Hades era when he used the Hades halberd. Every strike seemed to shatter the void. After all, the Hades halberd was the weapon he used to conquer the world, and he could use it with ease. However, there was no more Golden Source Stone. Although the suppression on Hades Tenzang was gone, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch did not show any obvious signs of weakening. Although he was weakened in all aspects, he could still block Hades Tenzang's attacks. Moreover, Tian Song could sense that Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's crazed mind seemed to be much clearer at this moment. Boom! The halberd swept across in front of him. A crimson crescent arc swept across and sent Nether Puppeteer Patriarch flying into the distance. The halberd fell. A clanging sound rang out. Sparks flew in all directions. One of the spider legs broke instantly. The cut was smooth, and it flew away, smashing hard to the ground. The spider leg was extremely heavy, causing the ground to cave in and the spider leg to sink even deeper into the ground. But the blood in Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's eyes finally faded. When she regained her senses, she was in disbelief. She saw Hades Tenzang and the expressionless Bufang. None of them were dead. She had used the god's heart fragment, but why hadn't she killed them? She had thought that she would be lost in the supreme power of the god's heart fragment and eventually die with these fellows. But now she was clear-headed. She touched her chest. It was empty except for a few withered golden threads hanging there. Where's the god's heart fragment? Nether puppeteer patriarch froze. What the hell happened? What happened when I was lost? Suddenly, a rumble rang out. Tian Song's cold eyes swept over her, accompanied by the terrible attack of Hades's halberd. 8 spider legs overlapped each other. They seemed to have turned into a shield. However, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was knocked flying backward by the halberd, plowing a deep trench in the ground. In midair, Tian Song looked down at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, who was knocked flying by his halberd. He was a little disappointed. Without the golden source stone, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was too weak. You disappoint me. Hades Tenzang sighed with emotion. The Heaven Nether Puppet's fleshly body had made Tian Song's current strength numb. Grabbing Hades's halberd with one hand, he threw it at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Hades threw the halberd in an instant. There seemed to be a flame burning at the tip of the halberd. With a rumble, it smashed toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was frightened. Her 11 spider legs moved at high speed, and she dodged to the side. Then a rumble rang out. Hades's halberd smashed the ground, flattening it again. The power of destruction spread in all directions. Except for the old site of the Black Temple, nearly 10,000 miles around the battlefield had been reduced to ruins. The great city, tens of thousands of miles away, was shaking violently. This was the power of destruction of the Great Sage Realm. And that was when they were suppressing their power. He didn't pick up Hades's halberd. Jets of air shot out of Hades Tenzang's back. His whole body turned into an arc, fell from the sky, and smashed into the ground around Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. He reached out a hand. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch couldn't dodge, and he grabbed her hand. Then, Hades Tenzang threw a punch at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's head. Bam! Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's eyes widened, and she felt her pretty face twisting again. Madman, Tian Song is a madman. How could he be so cruel to a pretty girl like me? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch almost roared. However, something that made her despair even more happened. A ripping sound rang out. Tian Song, expressionless, grabbed one of her spider legs and tore it hard. Accompanied by a miserable howl, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's eyes turned bloodshot. She was a half-puppet, so she could still feel pain. The pain of having her spider leg torn off made her scalp go numb. One spider leg after another was torn off. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was trembling all over. Tian Song grabbed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's head with his huge palm. His eyes were indifferent. Tian Song would not show any mercy to this guy who dared to turn his own body into a puppet. Even though she was a woman, in his eyes, she was just an old witch. He had seen many beautiful women, and this old witch did not make a difference. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had never thought that one day she would end up in such a miserable state. Both the Earth Nether Puppet and the human Nether Puppet were blown to pieces. She seemed to have become a prisoner. The way Tian Song looked at her, as if he was looking at an ant, made her feel humiliated and a little crazy. Unfortunately, she didn't have the strength to do so. Tian Song's palm grew stronger and stronger. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch felt as if her head was about to be crushed. Once it was crushed, she, the legendary Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, would most likely fall. I really don't want to die like this, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch said, coughing up blood. From the moment you dared to turn Ai's body into a puppet, you are destined to be punished by Ai, said Tian Song. Hades Tenzang said coldly. The next moment, Tian Song's palm tightened. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch wailed. A cracking sound rang out, and cracks appeared on her head. Blood flowed down, streaking across her fair skin. The moment she was about to die, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch opened one of her eyes. The blood from the top of her head trickled down her long eyelashes. With difficulty, she exhaled a breath of hot air through her nose and mouth. In a trembling voice, she spat out the words she had pinned all her hopes on. Listen. Chapter 1362. Ting, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, whose head was grabbed by Hades Tenzang and felt like it was about to be crushed, let out a staccato cry. As soon as the cry rang out, Hades Tenzang's eyes narrowed, and his expression changed slightly. Ting, the strongest existence in Nether Prison? The guy who is said to have broken through the shackles and is bent on merging the netherworld into a great world, is here? Hades Tenzang's heart tightened. His divine will swept out and scanned the surroundings. Just hearing the name made him a little nervous. It was an incredible feeling. Who was he? He was Hades Tenzang, the fearless Tiansong who even dared to attack Nether Prison and conquer all the worlds. However, when he heard the words from Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's mouth, his heart skipped a beat. That was right. It was a throbbing feeling. He sucked in a cold breath as if he had heard something forbidden. Bufong was in the distance. He furrowed his brows. He also heard Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's feeble words. Ting. These two words seemed to have some magical power that made one's heart tense. It was a very familiar name. Bufong frowned. The familiarity came from the memory of his previous life. Ting was the divine beast of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Legend had it that it was called the Nine Odd Beasts, and it gathered the strengths of many spirit beasts in the world. Is this Ting the same as the legendary Ting in the memory of my previous life? Is it really the divine beast of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva? For some reason, these feelings suddenly emerged in Bufong's mind. However, he felt that it might just be the same name. This was a different world, and this earth prison was not the one with the nether world in the memory of his previous life. So, it was clear that this Ting was not the one he knew. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch called out to Ting. She was calling out the name as if it was her struggle and murmur before her death. The name seemed to carry all her hopes. The way things had developed was completely beyond Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's expectation. He did not expect Bufong to have a means to resurrect Hades Tenzang. That was to fight against the supreme power of law. How could Bufong do that? Although the resurrected Hades Tenzang was strong, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch wasn't afraid of him. She even went berserk and unleashed the power of the Heart of God fragment in an attempt to kill everyone present. She would rather unleash a suicidal attack than disturb Truth Listener. She was afraid that Truth Listener's breakthrough would be affected. But what surprised her even more was that her Heart of God had been stolen. It was stolen by that damned puppet. She spent her days making puppets, but in the end, she was defeated by a puppet. Perhaps this was her retribution. The heavenly Tao reincarnated. Who would the heavens spare? On the verge of death, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was filled with reluctance and fear. Therefore, she opened her mouth and shouted this name that seemed to symbolize a taboo in the sky. A rumbling sound rang out. One after another, figures tore through the void and came out. Blazing flames burned and shadows swayed. There was even a person wearing a black chef robe, who looked like an immortal floating in the air. The great sage of the 9 Nether Prison clans had arrived. However, what awaited them was Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's near-death fate. And then there was that shout of hearken as soon as the name came out. The expressions on their faces changed. He became extremely uneasy and frightened. Nether Prison, the clan grounds of the Ting lineage. This was a terrifying world wrapped in a pitch-black vortex. The vortex was spinning, and there seemed to be a rumbling sound within it. The black energy seemed to pulsate with every breath. This feeling was incomparably terrifying. Vaguely, it was as if he could see a blurry figure sitting cross-legged in the center of the vortex. The hearken, ting, the faint voice drifted over and resounded in the sky. They lingered around the vortex like resentful ghosts, causing one's hair to stand on end. A great sage of the Ting lineage sat cross-legged not far away. All of a sudden, he opened his eyes. He seemed to be wondering what he had heard. All of a sudden, he heard it clearly. He heard a distant sigh. The sigh came from a black vortex. From the vortex? The great sage's expression changed as he looked at the whirlpool. The whirlpool, which had been spinning rapidly, suddenly slowed down. Then it slowly stopped spinning. Another sigh could be heard. It made the great sage's face twitch. He knelt on the ground, extremely excited. Patriarch, is the Patriarch coming out of seclusion? The Patriarch is breaking through to the supreme realm, which is a realm above the great sage of the perfected realm. No one in the whole nether prison has achieved it for tens of thousands of years. Had Patriarch D. Ting succeeded? If that's the case, it will be a joyous occasion for the D. Ting lineage. The patriarchs might shake the world. Welcome out of seclusion. The great sage of the D. Ting lineage trembled uncontrollably as he cried out in excitement. His voice rumbled through the air. The whole D. Ting clan's land seemed to be boiling at this moment. After pausing for a moment, the vortex finally began to slowly shrink. It spun again, but at a slower speed. Then, a clear sound of footsteps rang out. A figure slowly emerged from the vortex. Tap, tap, tap. As the footsteps grew more and more frequent, the great sage of the D. Ting lineage knelt on the ground, looking more and more respectful. He could already feel the supreme pressure coming from the vortex. He had never felt this kind of pressure before. Even Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, who was a perfected great sage, could not compare to it. Is that the legendary realm above the great sage? What realm is that? Countless people yearned for it. Tap, tap, tap. The great sage of the D. Ting lineage looked up at the vortex, wanting to see the glory of the patriarch after his breakthrough, along with the rhythmic sound of footsteps resounding. It lived up to his expectations. The figure in the vortex gradually became clear. However, after seeing the figure clearly, the great sage of the D. Ting lineage froze. He was completely dumbfounded. His eyes were filled with astonishment, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Heavens! This is the patriarch of the D. Ting lineage? The great sage of the D. Ting lineage felt that his worldview had collapsed. This was because the one who slowly walked out of the vortex was not some peerless expert with peerless talent, nor was it some terrifying existence with a majestic aura that could shake the world. Instead, it was a cute dog? What the hell? A dog? The patriarch of the D. Ting lineage, the supreme existence that they respected so much and whose power shook the whole Earth prison, was actually a dog? And a cute dog? The great sage was dumbfounded, looking at the unhurried and nimble little puppy that seemed to be hopping out of the whirlpool with a constipated look on his face. He looked like he was constipated. How should he describe the dog? It had alternating yellow and white fur, upturned ears in a triangular shape, a split forehead, and yellow fur on both sides of its eyes. Its nose was black, and it was slightly plump with a cute appearance and short legs. Although it looked like it was taking small steps with short legs, it was very fast. In a flash, it appeared next to the great sage of the D. Ting lineage. The space around the dog was faintly distorting, as if it was about to collapse. A terrible aura lingered. The great sage had not recovered from the huge shock, so he was still kneeling on the ground, his mouth wide open, and he even forgot to breathe. The patriarch of the D. Ting lineage was a dog. Truth listeners' eyes were very spirited and filled with spirit chi. Although its legs were short, its movement speed was extremely fast. It seemed that it had just walked out of the terrible vortex of nether energy. Therefore, it had no time to hide its identity. Buzz, pitch-black nether energy quickly gathered. Before long, it wrapped around D. Ting's body, and a terrible pressure arose, causing the great sage to lie on the ground, not daring to move. You didn't see anything. A faint, lofty voice rang out. The great sage came to his senses and didn't dare to move. All hail the patriarch. The great saint swallowed a mouthful of saliva. So what if Patriarch D. Ting was a dog? Flap, flap. A gust of wind blew past them. It didn't stir up any dust. Hades Tenzang grabbed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's head with one hand. His eyes narrowed slightly. He released his divine will and scanned the surroundings. The next moment, the corners of his mouth curved upward, and a cold smile appeared on his face. D. Ting, will he come to save you? Hades Tenzang said lightly. D. Ting was at the critical moment of his breakthrough. If he saved Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, he would have to interrupt his breakthrough. Was it worth it to save Nether Puppeteer Patriarch? It wasn't worth it, was it? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's long eyelashes fluttered, and soon she slowly closed her eyes. She seemed to have given up hope. She waited quietly for death. Hades' Tenzang didn't soften his heart. At his level, soft-heartedness no longer existed. Besides, he wouldn't show any mercy to Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. So if he wanted to kill her, he would do it without mercy. Glowing with a metallic luster, he slowly clenched his fist, and a terrible force seemed to burst out of it. Crack, a crisp shattering sound rang out. Then, under everyone's gazes, Bufong stood up. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's head slowly cracked open, and her pretty face was twisted. Slash! Her body shook. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch coughed up blood. In the sky, the great sages of Nether Prison were all silent. Hades' Tenzang's resurrection and Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's death were major events that could change the power balance of two small worlds. Without Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, Nether Prison would not be able to withstand Hades' Tenzang's attack in the near future. Unless it was as Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had said. Ting was able to come out of the breakthrough. He looked at her head, which was being squeezed in Hades' Tenzang's hand. Bufong and the others, on the other hand, looked calm. On the Infernal Realm side, not many people showed any sympathy, even if the other party was a woman, and a rather beautiful one at that. But everyone knew that she was a crazy woman. Die. Hades' Tenzang took a deep breath and spat out those cold words. Rumble. This time, he no longer exerted his strength. Previously, he had slowly exerted strength in order to test if the so-called truth listener would really attack. Now, it seemed that Ting had indeed chosen to give up on Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Perhaps in Ting's opinion, the breakthrough was more important. Of course, this was the choice of a normal person. Crack! His bones shattered. A tremendous force exploded out of him. All of a sudden, Hades' Tenzang's expression changed. He found that the moment his force exploded out, a terrible supreme pressure suddenly descended. Hades' Tenzang, who had never flinched even when facing Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, suddenly changed his expression at this moment. He raised his head. Then, he looked up at the boundless sky. He took a deep breath. The sky had changed. All of a sudden, it became very dim, as if it had turned from bright to dark in a flash. It was pitch black. The void was torn apart. A huge gap emerged. Tian-Tsang, stop. A mighty voice rang out like that of a god. The deafening sound lingered in everyone's ears, causing almost everyone to shrink back. In a huge gap in the void, at this moment, a figure wrapped in boundless black nether energy appeared. Ting. The strongest man of Nether Prison, Ting, had really appeared. The strongest man of Earth Prison against the strongest man of Nether Prison. This was a battle that had never been seen in 1,000 years. The real confrontation between the two realms was about to break out at this moment. Hades' Tenzang narrowed his eyes and fixed them on the figure in the hole. Bufong, Hades' Era, Ice Saint, and the others also had serious looks on their faces. Why should I stop when you say so? Why should I? Hades' Tenzang was still holding Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body as he spoke domineeringly. He was not afraid of Ting at all. He reached out a hand, and Hades' halberd was sucked into his palm. His eyes narrowed. Hades' Tenzang grabbed Hades' halberd and threw it out. A ripping sound rang out. It seemed to tear the sky apart. The Nether King halberd turned into a pitch-black arrow and shot toward the Ting, who was shrouded in black smoke in the sky. Why should I? Because I am Ting. If you kill her, I will destroy Earth Prison. His voice rang out in a domineering manner. Then, Hades' halberd was entangled by a plume of black smoke. Crack! Crack! Twisted by a terrible force. Hades' halberd was completely twisted and cracked. Chapter 1363. Suddenly, he twitched the corner of his mouth. Ting's gentle voice rang out again, but there was a hint of coldness in it. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded when they heard that. A rumble rang out, and the ground rumbled as a deep pit emerged. It was this mystery that made people feel awestruck. There seemed to be a hint of helplessness in his sigh. At the same time, a small, furry yellow and white claw reached out of it and lightly slapped toward Tian-Tsang's attack. Boom! Boom! Although his attack was broken, he wasn't surprised at all. Bufang had always been curious about Di Ting, who had a familiar name. It was as if he was saying, she was in a terrible state. The gentle voice sneered. He watched with great interest. Fire Demon Patriarch and the others were very excited. Hades' heaven-breaking halberd. Shatter the void. The god of slaughter? You? Di Ting was indeed the strongest man in Nether Prison. With just a secret attack, he had suppressed everyone and made it hard for them to breathe. Tian Song's aura sword. A plume of black smoke turned into a rope wrapped around Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and pulled her behind him. Di Ting, who had blocked Tian Song's halberd for Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, exploded in an instant. A chill ran down his spine. The situation was beyond everyone's imagination. Now that he had seen Di Ting's power for the first time, he felt that he deserved his reputation. The gentle voice rang out and echoed in Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's ears. The poem caught Bufang off guard. It never occurred to him that the great sage Acheron, a vulgar fellow who only knew how to hold grass, could recite a poem. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's eyelashes fluttered. His roar shook the heavens. The next moment, Hades Tenzang's pupils constricted. Since ancient times, too much love leaves only regret, and this regret will never end. Good poem, good poem. This scene is perfect. However, he was a little taken aback. Where's the heart of God? Hades Tenzang's one-hit kill was destroyed once again. It was as if Di Ting had a pair of eyes staring at Hades Tenzang. An invisible force spread out. How domineering. Hades' halberd exploded before it could even get close. He seemed to have heard Tian Song's roar. He became more and more muscular. Xiaobai took it with his own strength. Why should he return it? Besides, why didn't Di Ting come for Nether Puppeteer Patriarch? Have a good rest. The heart of God cannot be lost. I will get it back. Under this move, the Fire Demon Patriarch and the others all fell silent, not daring to move at all. However, Hades Tenzang did not give up. A stream of black energy poured into Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body. Hades Tenzang sneered fearlessly. Thrilling. It was the weapon that had accompanied Hades Tenzang in his conquest. Legend had it that it was made of kind of meteorite, which was extremely strong and could break through anything. Hades Tenzang looked at Di Ting. The battle in the sky had shocked everyone. No one had expected that the unstoppable Hades Tenzang would be crushed. He held a jade jar in his hand and took a sip of the fine wine. Didn't you come here to save me? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch roared. After that, he coughed and coughed up blood, which swept across the sky. Di Ting said, this was a clash between the strongest experts of Earth Prison and Nether Prison. Hades' heaven-breaking halberd. Kill a saint with 2 halberds. The material used to make Hades' halberd was extremely precious. It was made of meteorite iron, which cost Earth Prison countless manpower and material resources. Otherwise, how could he have sent a clone to Earth Prison? No, you're here for the heart of God. You're not here to save me. He stomped his foot hard on the ground, causing it to shake and rumble as if it was about to shatter. The atmosphere in the sky changed again. Countless figures fell from the sky and smashed to the ground. Hades Tenzang's long-awaited strike collapsed in an instant. Di Ting is indeed Di Ting. Fire Demon Patriarch and the others all recognized Sword Demon Patriarch. When they saw that he was refined into a puppet, they were slightly shocked, and their faces turned unsightly. Tian Song threw Nether Puppeteer Patriarch out of his hand. The heart of God, do you think it's with me? With the heavenly nether puppet's fleshly body, Hades Tenzang's cultivation base seemed to be even stronger than before. It was extremely tough, sharp, and invincible. Looking at his father's famous killing move, Nether King Erha's eyes were also filled with a bright light. Isn't Hades Tenzang very arrogant? There was only one figure left in the entire world. It was the huge figure wrapped in black gas that was floating in the air. Of course, I'm here to save you, but I can't lose the heart of God. The array in the Black Temple was still operating, and a huge vortex was spinning. The next moment, Hades Tenzang turned into a shooting star, and shot toward Ting. There's still true love in the world? Hades' era gave Bu Fong a sideways glance. He felt that Bu Fong's emotional intelligence was not on the same level as his at all. How lonely! They collided. However, Hades' era analyzed the situation for Bu Fong. He put more force into his palm. However, of course, no one noticed that the great sage, who was standing next to Ting with his head bowed, had a strange expression on his face. Have a good feel of what a god is. The threads on Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body hovering in front of Ting seemed to have withered. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes. Both of them were full of legends. Now that they collided, they would attract the attention of the crowd. It was as if their every move could affect this part of the world. It was also a black dot. Fire Demon Patriarch and the others sucked in their breaths. Swoosh! Bu Fong, too, focused his eyes and watched seriously. A terrible force exploded out of him without hesitation. Then, his eyes widened as a look of disbelief appeared on his face. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's charging body was restrained by a force. Ting didn't even make a move, but he had stopped Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and dissolved the energy Tian Tsang had left in it. With a clanging sound, a brand new Hades' halberd appeared in midair. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was extremely weak. Back then, when he went in Nether prison and suppressed everyone, Ting did not show up, so he thought he was afraid. However, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch just sneered and didn't answer. Ting's voice came out of his mouth. Ting, you are here at last. He was greatly encouraged. The Lord Go was also breaking through that realm. He wondered what the final result would be. Hades Tenzang, the strongest man in Earth Prison, had once led the army of Earth Prison to Nether Prison and defeated the 9 clans. However, this gentle voice and the domineering words spoken did not feel out of place at all. Ting was known as the strongest man in Nether Prison, and his strength was invincible. The next moment, Bu Fong turned his head and looked at the black temple behind him. Ting's voice was pleasant and gentle, comparable to the Lord Go's. And those words, however, he slowly drifted down from the sky. A cracking sound rang out. Rumble. He waved the halberd and swept it again. Ting and Nether Puppeteer Patriarch had been friends for the longest time, and it was not impossible for them to develop feelings for each other. On the Nether Prison side, Ting's gentle voice asked again. Hades Tenzang grabbed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch and shot in the sky like a cannonball. Let's see how you can continue to be so arrogant. A huge halberd seemed to fall from the sky. It seemed to crush the void. He raised his head and looked curiously at Ting in the void. A cracking sound rang out. Ting's eyes lit up. He was indeed the strongest man in Earth Prison. His strength was not weaker than it was 10,000 years ago. Please believe in true love in the world. There is still true love in the world. If you have what it takes, do it now. Blood trickled down Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's face, and her faint howl rang out. She hovered in front of the black smoke. It was as if she was going to suppress the void. Bu Fong rose to his feet. Rumble. Hades raised his halberd. Buzz, it helped her stabilize her injuries. Now, even his offensive weapon was broken by Patriarch Ting's attack. His divine will surged. Fire Demon Patriarch and the others felt their hair stand on end when they heard that. Didn't you hear what I said? I said, stop. Hades' era was clearly interested in the love and hatred between Ting and Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. The look on Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's face was somewhat unsightly. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes and saw the black smoke in front of her. Hades' halberd. The color of heaven and earth changed at this moment. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Buzz, Bu Fong, young man, I feel you're in big trouble. Ting's target doesn't seem to be Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, but the Sourstone Shao by got just now. So when they heard that, they subconsciously thought that Ting was getting revenge for Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. It was terrible. They found that the plot seemed to be a little beyond their expectation. If you kill him, I'll destroy Earth Prison. There was no doubt that Hades Tenzang had lost the first round of the battle. Ting's voice was as gentle as ever. Black energy turned into tentacles and drifted out of them, reaching toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. However, D-Ting's body was blocked by a terrifying force before it could even get close. The Hades King halberd, which had always been successful, met its Waterloo this time. Boom, boom, boom. It was so King exciting. This level was indeed terrible. A whistling sound rang out. Sword Demon Patriarch, who had turned into a puppet, emerged in an instant. As his words rang out, the aura on his body began to soar. Not long after, it had reached a terrifying level. Great Sage Acheron grinned, his eyes misty and filled with emotion. Steam seemed to rise from his body. Immediately, endless energy surged. A huge halberd light that blotted out the sky gathered in the sky and swept toward D-Ting. Wherever it passed, the void trembled and turbulence filled the air. Black smoke swirled around D-Ting's body. Hades' heaven-breaking halberd, God-killing 3 halberds. Hades Tenzang's eyes were as cold as ever. Hades Tenzang, who was about to attack, stopped. In the black gas, it slowly dissipated. Suddenly, it seemed to be caressing him. Hades Tenzang grinned. Like a black that it shot toward Hades' halberd. A sigh rang out. The corners of Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's mouth curved into a smile, and there seemed to be a look of nostalgia in his eyes. Wasn't he very strong? At the front of the halberd light was Tian Tsang, who was holding Hades' halberd. The great sage of D-Ting hurried forward. After being thrown out by Hades Tenzang, he sped toward D-Ting. The next moment, black smoke swirled around him. Under the effect of nether energy, Hades' halberd twisted. A supreme force struck it, and fine cracks appeared on its sturdy body. Puff! Then, they looked at Nether Puppeteer Patriarch with less kindness. Hades' 3 halberds had the power to destroy the world. Sigh. It was too domineering. One could almost hear a touching emotion in it. A sword light whistled up into the sky. Where's your god's heart? However, Bufang didn't pay attention to it for too long. He turned his attention back to the battlefield. Bufang answered expressionlessly. Crack! Crack! The sound was deafening. All the Nether Prison Patriarchs were excited. Immediately, the broken pieces of Hades' halberd that had fallen to the ground rose into the sky. The great sage of Acheron landed beside Bufang and the others. The void exploded. This mellow pretense made him look so pure. But it was terrifying. It made him look mysterious. His metal body seemed to change according to his will. His voice faded away. Holding Hades' halberd, Hades Tenzang smiled coldly, as if he knew what D-Ting wanted to ask. Boom! 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 He stomped his foot. In the sky, after being suppressed for so long, they finally had a chance to turn the tables and breathe a sigh of relief. Bufang's expression was a little strange. Terrible energy gathered. Looking at D-Ting, who was surrounded by black smoke, he heard that D-Ting was also trying to break through that realm. Had he succeeded? Suddenly, a jet of black smoke shot out of the black smoke. It was defeated without any suspense. No one had expected that Hades Tenzang's cultivation technique would be blocked with one move, and it didn't even touch D-Ting's body. It slashed toward D-Ting. Got a slaughter? How arrogant. Her head was almost crushed, and it was full of cracks. The world seemed to lose its color at this moment. The power of the blow was extremely terrible. Her eyes were fixed on Hades Tenzang. If you dare to kill my wife, I'll destroy Earth Prison. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's body seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch became agitated, and he roared with all his strength. Chapter 1364. Then, a short paw poked out of the black nether energy. This was the first time D-Ting had shown a part of his body. However, many people still could not see it clearly. Only Hades Tenzang, who was about to collide with D-Ting, could see it. This paw, Tian Tsang's face became very strange and puzzled at that moment. He found that the paw looked familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Then his eyes went wide, and he sucked in a cold breath. Isn't this just a dog paw? Why did D-Ting, who was shrouded in black mist, thrust out a dog paw? Hades Tenzang was a little confused. He never thought that this would happen. Rumble. The sky trembled. A giant halberd that seemed as though it was about to tear the sky apart smashed down from the sky, as though it was about to smash everything into pieces. This was Hades Tenzang's famous offensive technique, Hades's 3 halberds. The power of each halberd was multiplied. A rumbling sound rang out incessantly. The Nether Prison Patriarchs had long held their breath when they saw this move. If it weren't for Di Ting, they might have turned and run away. They had to run. The man who struck was the strongest man in Earth Prison, Hades Tenzang, an existence who could overturn Nether Prison alone. Their courage had been torn to pieces by this man 10,000 years ago. God of killing? What an arrogant tone. Who in this world dares to kill a god? How dare a mortal blaspheme a god? For the first time, Di Ting's gentle voice fluctuated with a hint of sarcasm. His tone caused many people's expressions to slightly change. Many people heard a hint of disdain in his voice. This kind of disdain, it was as if a lofty god was disdainful of mortals and ants. In Di Ting's eyes, Hades Tenzang, who was invincible in the world, was like a humble ant. He thrust out his paw. It was an ordinary paw. There was no energy fluctuation, only black energy lingering around it, looming like a black mist. The great halberd descended from the sky and collided with that halberd. A thunderous rumble resounded as the two collided, resulting in an earth-shattering explosion. Rumble. However, the evenly matched battle that everyone had imagined did not appear. The clash between the strongest man of Nether Prison and the strongest man of Earth Prison did not seem as spectacular as people had imagined. What appeared was a one-sided suppression. There was a loud explosion. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Hades Tenzang's 3rd halberd had actually shattered inch by inch. The halberd's power, which seemed to have descended from the heavens, was as fragile as porcelain under this claw, continuously cracking apart. Boom! Then, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, the almost invincible Nether King Tiansong was knocked flying backward and smashed down from the sky. With a loud bang, it smashed onto the ground. The entire ground exploded. There was a deep depression, and a bottomless pit appeared. Terrifying energy constantly fluctuated in this deep pit. Hades Tenzang's body had fallen into this pit, and no one could see the bottom. This scene caused everyone to be at a loss for words. Hades Tenzang was defeated so easily. How could he be defeated so thoroughly? What happened to the evenly matched battle? Wait, suddenly. The crowd seemed to think of something, and their eyes widened. Could it be that Di Ting had taken that step? Otherwise, the great sage, who was also a perfected expert, could not have crushed his opponents so easily. Even when Hades Tenzang fought with Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, he had to exchange several blows before he could suppress him. It was a bold idea, but it startled many people, making them feel that it was very possible. On the Earth Prison side, Hades' era's pupils constricted. Watching his father be defeated by Di Ting with one move, he felt that his breath had stopped. In his heart, his father was an invincible god of war, but this time, he was completely defeated in front of him. It was hard for him to accept. Saint let out a soft sigh. Could it be that Truth Listener has really taken that step? Saint's long eyelashes fluttered. The skin on her beautiful face was so delicate that it seemed to be drained of blood. That step? You mean beyond the great sage? Hades' era seemed to understand something. Earth Prison Dog is also trying to break through to that level. But now it seems that he is one step behind Di Ting, and one step late is no different from 10,000 steps late. Saint let out a long sigh, feeling a little lonely. It was a familiar scene. Once an expert of that level appeared, it meant that this era was about to end. The end of one era was the beginning of another. This time, how many forces would be punished by the power of the law? Bufong's eyes narrowed. How strong would Hades Tenzang be after he was resurrected? Bufong knew very well that unless he crushed the divine power liquid drop, there was no way he could fight against Hades Tenzang. He was too strong, as if he stood at the peak of this world. Compared to Lord Dog in the past, he was much stronger. However, it was an existence that stood at such a level yet it was sent flying by Truth Listener with a single strike. Walala, the sound of rocks falling rang out. Hades Tenzang's body slowly floated up from the bottomless pit. His eyes flickered with a bright light, and there seemed to be some disbelief in his eyes. Beams of red light were gathering rapidly on his body. They were rays of light that came from his flesh. The power of these rays was extremely terrible. It was the ultimate killing move left behind by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Boom! An explosion rang out. Hades Tenzang aimed at D Ting in the sky. Then the rays shot out again. This time, the terrifying burning energy seemed to have scorched the void. The ray of light distorted the void, and the terrifying energy caused the entire world to turn silent. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The Nether Prison experts, who were about to cheer, suddenly couldn't make a sound, as if their throats were strangled. Or rather, he didn't know what to say. Hades Tenzang stared at the void of space. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed again. When the straight beam approached Truth Listener, it was as if the beam was about to explode. He was engulfed by an invisible force and immediately turned around. With a loud bang, the force engulfed Hades Tenzang's body. Hiss! Countless spectators sucked in a breath of cold air at this moment. This time, the spectators came from all directions. The Great Sage of Nether Prison, Earth Prison, the Nine Revolution Great Sage of Wingman Valley, and even the Great Sage of West Little Buddhism Realm watched the scene with a grave expression. It was a clash between the top experts of Nether Prison and Earth Prison, and it would decide the future of the Netherworld. Naturally, they couldn't ignore it. Wingman Valley and West Little Buddhism Realm had surrendered to Nether Prison, but that didn't stop them from paying attention to the battle, especially when the one who made the move this time was Nether Prison's most mysterious expert, D Ting. In the battlefield of the stars beyond the sky, a handsome man with fluttering blonde hair and 12 pure white wings on his back hovered in midair, watching with a deep look in his eyes. In the distance, a Buddha sat in the starry sky, with a light disk hovering over his head. Everyone knew that countless people were watching the battle at this moment. Hades Tenzang's fame shook the whole Netherworld. But D Ting had defeated Tian Song with one move. This made many small worlds despair. How could they fight against Nether Prison, which was guarded by D Ting? Perhaps they could only be conquered by Nether Prison. Rumble, flames were burning. The sand and stones on the ground were melting. At this moment, Hades Tenzang's body emerged. He was unscathed by the backfire of the light rays, but his body was boiling with heat. The metal on him seemed to be melting. This power, there was still a look of shock in Hades Tenzang's eyes. So, you have no idea how terrifying a so-called god is. You can't understand what a god is. D Ting's voice was still very smooth and gentle. All of a sudden, he moved. No one noticed that he had moved as if he had teleported. However, he did appear in front of Hades Tenzang. A pair of eyes seemed to collide with Hades Tenzang's. With just a glance, he saw through Hades Tenzang's heart. The power of a god is unpredictable, D Ting said. Have you touched that level? Hades Tenzang took a deep breath and said incredulously. However, only D Ting's faint laughter came out of the black mist. The next moment, in everyone's eyes, a striped yellow and white dog's paw emerged. This time, there was no disguise, so everyone could see it clearly. What came out of the black mist was a dog's paw. Boom! The paw slapped Hades Tenzang's body. The puppet's incomparably tough, fleshly body collapsed in an instant. With a boom, it was pierced by the dog's paw. A terrible explosion occurred. At the same time, a plume of energy that was as black as ink drilled into Tian Song's body, causing him to explode in the sky with a rumble. He fell powerlessly from the void and fell to the ground. This time, there was no terrible power, so his body just smashed into the ground and created a pit. However, Tian Song, who had been smashed into the pit, remained motionless. One move, one dog's paw, Tian Song was defeated. The world fell silent. No one knew what to say. D Ting had defeated Tian Song with one move, and Tian Song had no power to fight back. This Di Ting had surpassed the limit of the netherworld. Could it be that he really became a great saint? You overestimate yourself. Not everyone dares to think about slaying a god. Di Ting withdrew his paw and said lightly. His voice rang through the void, but no one dared to refute him. The next moment, Di Ting's eyes turned and rested on Bu Fong in the distance. Buzz, an invisible wave spread out, and in an instant, it covered Bu Fong's body. Bu Fong's body stiffened. This is divine sense? Divine perception, divine will, divine sense, according to the mental force cultivation method rewarded by the system. When the mental force was cultivated to the extreme, it was condensed into divine sense. Divine sense. He could not believe that Di Ting had cultivated divine sense. Buzz Bufong looked up at Di Ting, who was shrouded in black mist. His spirit sea was filled with raging waves. Little host. Divine Dragon twisted his body and said worriedly, Danger! This guy. Vermilion Bird murmured. The black tortoise's turbid eyes opened. Demigod. This was the first time Bu Fong had seen the artifact spirits in his spirit sea, so worried. It was enough to show how great a threat Di Ting posed to him. In the black mist, Di Ting's gaze swept across. It fell on Bu Fong. Interesting, a familiar feeling. Your aura is really nostalgic. Di Ting's gentle voice rang out. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes. He said nothing. His vermilion robe fluttered, even though there was no wind. A crimson light surged. Behind him, a pair of fiery red wings flapped, sending flaming feathers flying. Bu Fong's expression was unprecedentedly serious. Di Ting was the first existence that gave him a dangerous aura. Clatter. You, holding Little Hu in her arms, took a step forward and came to Bu Fong's side, her beautiful eyes fixed on Di Ting. A ghostly green light flashed in her eyes. When Di Ting saw the ghostly green light, he paused for a moment, feeling a sense of déjà vu. Then he narrowed his eyes. A cursed goddess. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect the cursed goddess, who has always been my enemy, to be with you. Di Ting gave Bu Fong a meaningful look. Then he clicked his tongue. Unfortunately, I'm not looking for you, but this. Buzz. As soon as his voice rang out, then Di Ting reached out his paw again. The yellow and white dog paw stunned Bu Fong, and he couldn't help but feel a little strange. The dog's paw came crashing down. It crushed the void. It slapped toward Xiao Bai, who was behind Bu Fong. You've eaten my god's heart, so you'll have to spit it out eventually, Di Ting said. The paw pressed down. Great sage Acheron, Hades era, Ice Saint, Bu Fong, and the others felt as if they were going to kneel. It was an aura that was high and mighty, like that of a god, as if they were facing a real god. The paw slapped toward Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed as he raised his head mechanically. The ground beneath him began to collapse and crack. However, just as the claw was about to descend, a voice suddenly rang out. In the black temple, the invisible whirlpool that was spinning suddenly stopped spinning. A gentle and magnetic sigh suddenly exploded in the void. Chapter 1365. Di Ting's strength was beyond everyone's imagination. With just one strike, he had shattered Hades' Tenzang, leaving him defenseless. The strength of this power was indeed unprecedented. Many people were horrified. They thought that Di Ting might have surpassed the great sage's realm and become an existence above the great sage, like a god. God was a confusing term. It was different from the so-called true immortal realm. A god was a god, a realm that had transcended the shackles and was not bound by the great path. It was a supreme realm. Had Di Ting become a god? If he really became a god, no one could stop him. No one in the entire netherworld could stop him. A god was a realm that surpassed men. From the fact that Hades' Tenzang couldn't even resist one strike from Di Ting, perhaps Di Ting had really become a legend. To Di Ting, the god's heart had an indescribable effect. He had given it to Nether Puppeteer Patriarch so that she could protect it and use its power to cultivate. However, he had never thought that someone in the netherworld would be able to snatch the god's heart away. That was why Di Ting had come to Earth Prison. He couldn't lose the god's heart, so he had to get it back. His divine sense locked onto Whitey's body. He ignored Bufong and Yu, even though their identities were not ordinary. The former was that man's inheritor, and the latter was known as the only curse goddess in an era. However, they had not grown up yet. What really caught his attention was Xiaobai, the Xiaobai who had stolen the god's heart. A dog paw rushed out of the black mist, instantly attracting everyone's attention. That claw seemed to have caused the heavens and earth to darken. Everyone felt an enormous pressure on their bodies, causing them to involuntarily lie on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Waves of pressure swept over like ripples, bombarding Hades' era and the others. They were shocked and astonished. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered as it raised its head. The moment Di Ting's claw came at him, he got up from the ground. He sped away at high speed. He spread his metal wings, but at this moment, they were full of holes and cracks. Obviously, after being bombarded by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch, his injuries were not light. With a flap of his wings, Xiao Bai's figure turned into a meteor shooting across the sky. In an instant, he fled far away, rushing into the distance. He tried to dodge the Harkon's claw. However, this claw seemed to envelop a part of the world. No matter how hard Xiao Bai ran, he couldn't get out of the range of this claw. This move was somewhat similar to the West Little Buddhism realm's Buddhist kingdom in a palm. You won't be able to escape after devouring my god's heart. Di Ting's indifferent voice shook the sky. Then, everyone fell silent. He could only watch as Di Ting's claw came crashing down. Bufong raised his head, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. His divine will had already enveloped the golden liquid drop in the god of cooking's menu. With the explosion of the divine power liquid drop, Bufong should be able to resist this move. He couldn't just watch Xiao Bai be smashed by Di Ting's claw. After all, Xiao Bai had grown up with him, and in Bufong's eyes, he was like a brother. However, just as Bufong was about to crush the liquid drop in the Black Temple, the invisible whirlpool stopped spinning. Within the vortex, a pitch-black claw slowly slapped out from within. It was a dog's paw, small and exquisite. It came out of the Black Temple. Without dodging, it collided with Di Ting's claw. It was also a dog's paw. Di Ting's paw was yellowish-white, but it was shorter and more exquisite. The black dog's paw, on the other hand, looked a little more heroic. In the crowd's strange eyes, the two dog paws collided without any fancy moves. It was the collision of two dog paws. This could be counted as the most terrifying collision they had ever seen. A loud boom rang out. Whitey's body was sent flying by the shockwave, bouncing on the ground like a ball. He fell into the distance. He raised his head in a daze and touched his head with his fan-like palm. In the sky, Di Ting, wrapped in black smoke, let out a soft cry of surprise. He hadn't paid attention to Earth Prison Dog, who was breaking through in the Black Temple. He didn't expect that Earth Prison Dog would attack at this moment. Buzz, without hesitation, his divine sense swept out and surged toward the Black Temple. He wanted to find out what was going on inside. He knew that Earth Prison Dog was also breaking through. But as an experienced man, he knew very well that once the process was interrupted, it basically meant that the breakthrough had failed. If he wanted to regain the feeling of breaking through, he would need a chance. The Black Temple seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog. Di Ting's divine sense swept over. However, it was repelled by a force. Di Ting's expression changed. Of course, ordinary people couldn't see it. The gentle voice rang out once more. You bullied the Lord Go's men when the Lord Go is not here? Do you really think the Lord Go is a vegetarian? In the Black Temple, energy swept out as if there were energy ripples surging. The energy parted, and a figure slowly walked out of it. It was a black dog. Not a speck of dust could be seen on its pitch-black fur. It walked with enchanting cat-like steps and appeared at a moderate pace. Its appearance instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. Earth Prison Dog? Earth Prison Dog has come out of seclusion? The expressions of the Nether Prison Great Sage changed dramatically. They never thought that Earth Prison Dog would come out of seclusion so soon. Wasn't he trying to break through that supreme realm like Di Ting? Why did he come out of seclusion now? They weren't surprised that Di Ting came out of seclusion. After all, it had been almost hundreds of years since he entered the state of breakthrough. However, this Earth Prison dog had only stepped into the state of breakthrough a few days ago. You want to stop me? In the black fog, Di Ting's eyes flashed. Then he moved. His short legs moved. His figure suddenly disappeared from where he was. When he reappeared, he was at Xiao Bai's side. There was a loud bang. Xiao Bai felt that he was hit by a tremendous force. He immediately shot up into the sky. A white dog's paw slowly slapped towards him. It seemed to want to pierce through Xiao Bai's chest and take out the god's heart inside. However, the Lord Go's figure also disappeared at the same time. The exquisite black dog paw rose and collided with a white dog paw. Boom! Waves of air surged, constantly venting everything. Swoosh! The black fog dissipated, revealing Di Ting's figure. At this moment, the Lord Go's figure became clearer and clearer. In the sky, a yellow and white, striped, short-legged dog collided with Elder Dog's paw. Terrifying energy exploded continuously. Terrible energy kept rumbling. It caused the ground to collapse again as if it had been completely shattered. At this moment, everyone could see Di Ting's figure clearly. For a moment, everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. A dog? Di Ting was also a dog? Although this dog's legs were relatively short, it was still a dog. The fight between the two dogs made everyone's eyes pop out. They didn't know what to say. Was this a battle between the number one dog of Earth Prison and the number one dog of Nether Prison? Di Ting looked very cute, and it was hard to associate his fierce means with his appearance. The Lord Go grinned and barked. Di Ting's fur fluttered in the wind, and it barked as well. The two barks seemed to fuse into terrible energy. In an instant, they collided and exploded. Buzz's two figures, one white and one black, separated at the same time. At this moment, the sky above the Black Temple was filled with scattered void turbulence. Boom! A terrible pressure emerged from Di Ting's body, and his barking became more and more urgent. His short legs moved in the void. He rushed into the battlefield of the stars. The Lord Go's eyes narrowed. Striding like a cat, he stepped elegantly into the battlefield of the stars. The two dogs stepped into the battlefield of the stars, as if they had agreed to fight here. The battle broke out in an instant. The dog's paw moved across the battlefield of the stars. The dog's paw was like a mountain, and the dog's bark sounded like a dragon's roar. The black and white figures kept colliding and moving across the battlefield. Every time they collided, it would cause a terrifying rumble and explosion. Broken stars collapsed, and meteorites cracked. Even the stars seemed to be knocked down. This battle was like a peerless battle. Although it was only two dogs who started it, the fluctuations and terrible momentum of the battle made everyone fall silent. Hovering in midair, Bufong watched from a distance. This was the most important battle, even more important than the battle between Hades Tenzing and Di Ting. From the battle, it could be seen that the two were at the same level. One was beyond Tiansong. Hiss! The whole netherworld seemed to be shocked. Di Ting had stepped into the supreme realm. An Earth Prison dog could fight him to a draw. Could it be Earth Prison dog had also stepped into the supreme realm? How many tens of thousands of years had passed? How could two dogs do what the humans of the netherworld could not do? Looking at the battle between the dogs, many people's faces were a little strange and speechless. Bufong, on the other hand, had calmed down. Swoosh! Tian Song floated up. His chest was pierced by Di Ting's paw. However, it was not a big deal. After all, Tian Song's body was just a puppet. The material used was also a kind of mysterious material, and it was actually slowly recovering. Tian Song floated down and landed at Bufong's side. Have they transcended the realm of the great sage? Bufong asked. Except for the system and the artifact spirit, Hades Tenzing was perhaps the only one present who knew the realms of Lord Go and Di Ting best. You can say that, but you can also say that they are not. The so-called transcendence is not that simple. However, the realm beyond the realm of the great sage can also be called that. Hades Tenzang said. He had once touched the edge of that realm, but he chose not to try it. Instead, he gathered an army to attack Nether Prison. Unfortunately, he died in that battle, and he lost the qualification to break through. However, he had the most say in that realm. We can call them the realm above the great sage, and that realm is generally called demigods. Hades Tenzang took a deep breath, his face very serious. Demigod meant a half-step god. They were only half a step away from becoming gods and attaining the Tao. Even if they were the weakest gods, they were still gods, invincible existences, and they were different from the origin of life. Demigods, Bufong focused his eyes. He had heard from the artifact spirit that he was also shocked and called Di Ting a demigod. Perhaps demigods were the realm above the great sage. They dare not fight freely in Earth Prison. After all, the power of a demigod is beyond everything. Hades Tenzang said. Rumble. In the battlefield of the stars, the battle between Lord Go and Di Ting was getting fiercer and fiercer. However, the power that erupted from it caused everyone to be fearful. Pause collided with pause. The two dogs moved horizontally in midair. Blasts of energy spewed out of them, each of which seemed to be able to tear the 9-revolution great sage to pieces. Are you really going to stop me? Di Ting's eyes gradually turned red. His aura became more and more violent. Then he barked. His body changed, swelling up in an instant, and the image of 10,000 beasts loomed over him. There was a mysterious force around him, which seemed to turn into a river and swirl around him. Meanwhile, Lord Go's fat body changed as well. All of a sudden, he grew to the size of a mountain. His eyes were red, and 2 heads emerged from his neck. All 3 heads opened their mouths at the same time and let out a deafening roar. This was an unprecedented battle between demigods. Di Ting, who had gone berserk, was fighting against Earth Prison's 3-headed dog. Chapter 1366. This was the first time the Lord Go showed his complete form. All 3 heads emerged at the same time, and he was surrounded by Earth Prison fire that seemed to distort and burn the void. A terrifying pressure coiled around the entire battlefield, causing everyone to go silent like cicadas in the winter, and they didn't dare to move or resist in the slightest. In front of him, Di Ting had also undergone an astonishing change. His body was as huge as a mountain, and although his legs were short, his body was covered with the postures of all creations. There were the shadows of dragons, tigers, and leopards. All kinds of postures made people suck in their breaths. This was a clash of the pinnacle, a battle between demigods. Of course, many people didn't know what a so-called demigod was, but they could feel the terrible pressure coming from Di Ting and the Lord Go. In the face of this pressure, they could only retreat. The world seemed to be dim and silent. The light of the stars was dim and uncertain. The fight between the 2 dogs caused the whole battlefield of the stars to fluctuate. Both Nether Prison and Earth Prison were paying close attention to the battle. The outcome of the battle was extremely important, and the outcome would determine the leadership of the 2 forces in the future. Suddenly, someone's expression changed. They watched the battle between the 2 dogs, which were as huge as mountains. Many people felt a little uneasy. They were too strong, so strong that they seemed to have transcended the limits of this world. In the sky, a black hole emerged. The black hole was extremely mysterious, and as it spun, it seemed to suck away people's minds. Someone cried out in alarm and pointed a finger at the black hole. However, as soon as he raised his hand, it twisted in a strange way, and then, with a crack, his bones broke. The man's face contorted in pain. This situation attracted many people's attention. Bufong frowned. Looking at the black hole, he found it more and more familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. Then, he thought of something and turned to look at Hades Tenzang. Isn't that the transmigration that Hades Tenzang mentioned? No, this is not the transmigration. This black hole contains the power of the law, which was attracted by the battle between Di Ting and Earth Prison Dog. The law is supreme and can't be insulted, Tian Song said with a serious face. He directly revealed the mysteries of the black hole. The black hole's appearance wasn't because of Tian's song, but because of Truth Listener's battle with Lord Go. The power of the two dogs had surpassed the limit of what this world could bear. Thus, it was naturally detected by the power of the laws. Boom! The Lord Go and Truth Listener also sensed this commotion. Both of their hairs stood on end, as if they had sensed an unparalleled danger. It was a loud bang. After the two of them fought, it caused a wave of energy ripples. It was to flee. They floated in the starry sky. They were all vigilantly watching the law power that had just appeared. It was as if the power of law would punish them if they continued to fight. Ting glanced at the pitch-black black hole. Then, he glanced at the Lord Go. Then his body was instantly shrouded by black energy. With a twist of his body, he disappeared from the battlefield of the stars. Even Truth Listener was very afraid of nomological black holes. It was precisely because of this fear that Truth Listener did not plan on fighting to the death with Cerberus. He didn't expect that Cerberus could reach this level. This was far beyond his expectation. With Cerberus here, it would be very difficult to retrieve the god's heart. So, he didn't hesitate. He left and disappeared into the sky. The battle between Lord Go and Ting shook the starry sky and caused the whole netherworld to boil. Although the battle between the two demigods was mighty, neither of them could do anything to the other. Since they couldn't do anything to each other, Ting didn't waste any more time and chose to leave. As for the god's heart, he could only find a way to retrieve it. As the battle came to an end, hovering in the sky, Lord Go narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. His mountain-like body slowly shrunk, gradually turning into the plump appearance of Lord Dog. Meanwhile, the black hole of law spun in the starry sky and slowly dissipated. The battle was over. However, the people of the netherworld were shocked. Earth Prison and Nether Prison were evenly matched. Moreover, the most shocking thing was Earth Prison seemed to have the upper hand. This time, Earth Prison had gained a great advantage. Nether Prison had suffered a great loss in this battle. Putting aside the Dead Sword Demon Patriarch, the Heaven Nether Puppet, Earth Nether Puppet, and Human Nether Puppet that Nether Puppeteer Patriarch lost were enough to greatly damage Nether Prison's strength. Each Nether Puppet was equivalent to a perfected Great Sage. For Nether Prison, this was an unbearable price. But fortunately, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch was not dead yet. As long as she was alive, it meant that Nether Puppeteer Patriarch still had a chance to make a comeback. However, he had to admit that Nether Prison was at a disadvantage in this battle and had suffered a loss. Earth Prison Dog, who had become a demigod, and the resurrected Hades Tenzing had brought Earth Prison back to prominence. The whole netherworld was no longer dominated by Nether Prison. Nether Prison had Ting, but Earth Prison also had Earth Prison Dog. No one could do anything to the other. The black hole disappeared. Nether Prison's great sage turned and left one after another. The Winged Man Valley's great sage snorted coldly. Holy light sprinkled over him, and the 12 wings on his back flapped slowly. Then he broke through the void and flew away. The Buddha with the light disk over his head put his palms together and smiled gently. Amitabha, he said, then left as well. The whole battlefield of the stars fell into silence again. The Nether Prison experts had left. After a brief silence, Earth Prison's experts burst into deafening cheers. Their cheers seemed to explode in the battlefield of the stars. In midair, Lord Go yawned lazily. His dog eyes drooped slightly, as if he was about to fall asleep. Bufong looked at Lord Go and twitched the corner of his mouth. Hades Tenzang looked at Lord Go, and his eyes narrowed. The battle was over. However, the aftermath of the battle spread throughout the netherworld. All the small worlds in the netherworld learned about the battle. In the Heaven Chief realm, the Heaven Tree ran through the whole Heaven Chief realm and glowed with a bright light. Above the celestial tree, a naked figure stood there with a deep look in his eyes. Realm Lord Dit's eyes were much calmer, and his aura had become much stronger. After fusing with the Heaven Tree, his cultivation base had risen rapidly. However, it was precisely because of this that his cultivation base was fixed and could no longer grow. But he had no regrets. If it weren't for this, the Heaven Chief realm might have collapsed under the attack of the Nether Prison army. It would have been completely occupied by the Nether Prison. The Nether Prison had always wanted to build a great world. Unfortunately, it now seemed that this idea was going to fail. However, Realm Lord Dit, who had fused with the Heaven Tree, did not relax his expression at all. With a deep look in his eyes, he looked at the boundless starry sky and let out a long breath. If the Netherworld doesn't become a great world, it will eventually be sensed by other great worlds. At that time, it will also be a disaster. In Earth Prison, in front of the Black Temple, at this moment, the surroundings of the Black Temple had been completely reduced to ruins. The Black Temple stood tall, but it had turned into a huge canyon. Originally, it was surrounded by plains. However, because of the battle of the 9 Revolution Great Sage, the surrounding terrain had changed. This was the ability of the 9 Revolution Great Sage. In the void, a huge golden skeleton stood in the void, with blood-colored ghost fire dancing in its eye sockets. Looking at the figure in front of the Black Temple, he seemed to sigh with emotion, then turned and tore the void to leave. In front of the Black Temple, one by one, human figures gathered in the center. Hades Era, Great Sage Acheron, Ice Saint, and Prison Overlording Long. There was also the blood-illuminating dragon, whose head was bowed. You was sitting on the Netherworld ship with Little Hu in your arms. Bufong was leaning against the side of the Netherworld ship with his hands clasped behind his back. Lord Go was lying in front of the Black Temple, while Tian Song was standing with his burly body propped up. The wound on his chest was slowly healing. This was the strange thing about the heavenly Nether puppet. Unless it was completely destroyed, it would slowly recover. Earth Prison had won the battle to cover Lord Go's breakthrough. Nether Prison had suffered a great loss. Not only was Sword Demon Patriarch dead, but Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's 3 puppets were also killed. Of course, Earth Prison had paid a heavy price for this. Ice Saint was seriously injured again, and her face became haggard. Hades Era's aura was weak. The excessive outburst had caused him some serious side effects. At this moment, he was holding a spicy strip in his mouth to suppress his shock, so he was fine. Bufong had lost another divine power liquid drop. The loss was huge. However, to everyone's surprise, the biggest beneficiary of this battle was not Nether Prison, Earth Prison, Lord Go, or Di Ting. Instead, it was Xiao Bai, whom no one paid much attention to. Yes, it was that sly Xiao Bai. With a few moves, he had taken away the god's heart that even Di Ting had fought for. He could not believe that the god's heart could drive Di Ting crazy. Everyone was a little curious about it. The god's heart is a kind of energy source stone that is not produced in the Netherworld. It comes from a more powerful, great world. There are records of it in the historical records, but I don't know much about Lord Go. Lord Go said, yawning. In fact, he had suffered a loss in this battle, but not by much. He had wanted to break through to that supreme realm in one go. With the array, he could reach the God realm in 1,000 years in one day, but it was also possible. Of course, it was also possible that he would fail, and in the end, he would still be a demigod. Although there was only a difference of one word between demigod and god, the difference between them was like heaven and earth. After all, the Netherworld is only a small world, not a great world. It's not easy to become a god. Lord Go sighed. Ice Saint glanced at Lord Go, then at Hades Tenzang. She said, the god's heart is actually a product of the last age. It was obtained by a supreme existence after he killed an invader from a great world. That great world is very strong in the starry sky. As the master of the Forbidden Land, Ice Saint knew a lot of secrets. This made the crowd even more shocked. The way they looked at Xiao Bai became a little strange and envious. No wonder Di Ting went crazy. The energy source stone from a great world is enough to drive him crazy, Lord Go said, sticking out his tongue. Bufong and the others nodded in agreement. Bufong's eyes flashed. He had learned a lot from Ice Saint words. However, he didn't care. After all, he was just a chef, and there were some things he didn't need to know too much. The crowd left. Lord Go, on the other hand, stayed in the Black Temple. He needed to consolidate his cultivation base. Lord Go also knew that Di Ting would do the same. Otherwise, he would easily fall back to the great sage, and that would not be worth it. No one disturbed Lord Go, leaving Lord Go alone in the Black Temple. Once he consolidated his cultivation base, he would not need Bufong and the others to guard him. And in the whole netherworld, no one would dare to offend Lord Go. In Acheron City, after leaving the Black Temple, the crowd returned to Acheron City. Ice Saint returned to God Vanishing Mountain. She belonged to the Forbidden Land, so she could not leave for too long. The bustling Acheron City surprised Tian Song, who had been resurrected. No one was happier than Ing Long, the prison overlord, when he was resurrected. After all, he used to be Tian Song's favorite subordinate. The old man had been around Hades Tenzang every day, and he was as happy as a child. Acheron's little restaurant. The door was closed. Bu Fong and the others came to the door. Many vendors around saw Bu Fong and exclaimed, "Was Acheron's little restaurant going to reopen?" They rushed to line up in front of the restaurant. Then they opened the door. Bu Fong was the first to step into the restaurant. You followed behind him with Little Hu in her arms. Tian Song, Hades Era, Great Sage Acheron, and the others also stepped into the restaurant. Prison Overlord Ing Long, the other prison overlords, and the important figures of Earth Prison all stepped into the restaurant. When Bu Fong sat on a chair in the restaurant to get some fresh air, Prison Overlord Ing Long took the lead and knelt before Tian Song. The big shots of Earth Prison knelt in front of Tian Song. Everyone's face was very solemn. Bu Fong, you, and the others looked at them curiously. Your Excellency Tian Song, please take charge of Earth Prison Hades again and lead us to look down on the netherworld again. Prison Overlord Ing Long knelt on the ground and jerked his head up, his face grave. Hades Era also bowed his head and looked sincerely at Tian Song. Chapter 1367. In Acheron's restaurant, Bu Fong and you sat on the chair and opened their eyes curiously. Hades Tenzang stood in the middle of the restaurant with his hands clasped behind his back. He was tall and sturdy, and his handsome face showed traces of doubt. In front of Tian Song, there were several figures kneeling. Every single one of them was an illustrious figure in Earth Prison, but in front of Tian Song, they were filled with reverence. Master Tian Song, please regain control of the Hades Dao throne. Lead us back to the pinnacle. Prison Overlord Ing Long knelt on the ground, folded his palms together, and placed them in front of his head as he said respectfully. Beside him, the Hell Overlords also knelt and followed his movements. Jin Jiao, Yin Jiao, Luo Ji, and Yu Ji were all present. Ha, on the other hand, pursed his lips and looked expectantly at Tian Song, his eyes flashing. She looked at her father's handsome face and the aura that was so strong that it made people tremble. A look of excitement appeared on his face. To be honest, he was really looking forward to his father returning to the position of Hades. In that case, he would be free. Old man Ing Long didn't have the opportunity to supervise him on a daily basis, forcing him to cultivate and deal with matters of the infernal realm. For Hades Era, those things were too troublesome. Hades Era's dream was very simple. He wanted to eat spicy strips and bask in the sun in Bu Fong's restaurant. This kind of leisurely life was more suitable for him. As for things like becoming the Lord of Hell, overseeing the world, and being worshipped by heroes, he really didn't have much interest. Therefore, Hades Era looked at Tian Song expectantly, hoping that Tian Song would agree to Ing Long's request. Tian Song stood in place with his hands clasped behind his back. His burly body exuded a terrifying aura. He looked at Ing Long and the others, then at Hades Era, who seemed to be unable to hold back his laughter, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Ing Long, get up, Tian Song said. His voice was calm. No, if Lord Tian Song doesn't agree, I will not get up. Although Hell Overlord Ing Long was old, his temper was very stubborn. Tian Song glanced at him indifferently. He was well aware of Inglong's character after all these years. With a thought, his powerful divine sense swept out. Tian Song's divine will was very strong. After all, his cultivation base was that of the great sage, so his divine will had long since reached the pinnacle. The condensation of divine sense was naturally not that simple. In the entire netherworld, only Di Ting, an earth prison dog, had condensed divine consciousness. Once one had divine sense, it was equivalent to becoming a demigod. This was enough to show the importance of divine sense. Of course, a demigod was a demigod. You could say that he was still in the great sage realm. Although he had reached minor transcendence, he was still within the confines of a minor world, in the prison of heaven and earth. This was because whether it was Di Ting or Cerberus, neither of them had triggered the terrifying nomological lightning punishment during their breakthroughs. The stronger one's strength was, the more likely it was to trigger the tribulation of heaven and earth once they broke through. To become a god, one had to transcend the minor world, and the will of the great path's lightning punishment was no longer enough to make them palpitate. Therefore, a more supreme law was needed to send down the lightning punishment. Such a lightning punishment was very terrible. Once it exploded, it was as if the whole starry sky would turn into a sea of lightning. However, Di Ting and Lord Go had broken through to the demigod realm in silence. They did not trigger the lightning punishment, which meant that although their strength had reached the demigod realm, the so-called demigod realm still belonged to the great sage realm. They had not achieved true transcendence. Therefore, they did not trigger the lightning punishment. Of course, these were all off-topic. Tian Song's divine will drifted across the prison overlords. Lifting them up from the ground, the prison overlords all looked at Tian Song doubtfully. Why must I take the position of Hades? Didn't that little bastard Ha do a good job? But if he did a bad job, Era will become the Hades of Earth prison, and I, Tian Song, will become a thing of the past. Tian Song's voice was full of energy. This caused the expressions of the Hell overlords to change drastically. Without a doubt, Hades Tenzang had rejected their proposal and refused to take the position of Hades. This was somewhat out of their expectations. The cloudy eyes on Inglong's old face went wide. He looked at Tian Song in disbelief, as if he was surprised by Tian Song's refusal. Hades' Era was also dumbfounded. He had never thought that his father would reject him. Wasn't this a trap for his son? Were his good times, his spicy strips, and his leisurely life all going to go up in smoke? Hades' Era's heart twitched, and he felt a pang of sorrow. It was a very bad feeling. Although Era is young, he is now the lord of the netherworld, and only he can represent the Hades. As for me, I'm already a dead man. This body of mine is just lingering in this world, and I don't know when I'll be destroyed by the transmigration. Besides, the most important thing is that I've promised Owner Bu. Tian Song took a deep breath and said, Owner Bu. Hades' Era and the other prison overlords turned their eyes to Bu Fong, who was holding a spirit fruit and wolfing it down in the distance. What did this have to do with Owner Bu? Did Tian Song refuse to become Hades because of Owner Bu? I promised to stay in a restaurant and be a waiter. As the former Hades, my words carry enormous weight, so I can't go back on my word. Besides, I need Owner Bu's longevity noodles to prolong my life. I'll be a waiter, and Owner Bu will make longevity noodles for me. It's a deal. Otherwise, why would Owner Bu make longevity noodles for me? Hades Tenzang took a deep breath and said with a smile, Well, in fact, you can buy it with nether crystals. A bowl of longevity noodles is not expensive. It only costs 100,000 nether crystals. If you don't want to be a waiter, you can buy it with nether crystals. I'd be happy to do that, Bu Fong said, munching on the fruit. He was very serious. In fact, Bu Fong hoped that Tian Song could buy it with nether crystals. After all, the money he earned was Bu Fong's private money. Crunch, he took a bite of the spirit fruit, and juice splashed everywhere. The system's notification rang out in his head. The system said that if Tian Song bought the longevity noodles with nether crystals, the nether crystals would also be counted in the turnover. not Bufong's private money. Bufong rolled his eyes. Stingy system. You won't even give me 100 nether crystals? No, no, no. How can I show my sincerity by buying it with nether crystals? Hades Tenzang refused Bufong's suggestion without thinking. He was giving his life, so he naturally had to show his sincerity. How could his life, Hades Tenzang, be measured by vulgar money? So, Tiansong didn't give Era, Yinglong, and the other prison overlords too many chances to argue. He chose to be a waiter in Bufong's restaurant. Bufong didn't refuse. After all, they had agreed on it. Bufong was very satisfied with the addition of a powerful Hades Tenzang. After eating the god heart, Xiao Bai had fallen into a deep sleep. No one knew how long it would take for him to wake up and wake up. With Tiansong here, the restaurant was temporarily in order. Why not? So Bufong nodded silently. Of course, the main reason was that if Tiansong bought the noodles, the nether crystals he earned would be counted in the turnover. In that case, it would be better to let Tiansong be a waiter. Did Bufong look like the kind of person who lacked a turnover of 100,000 nether crystals? With a crunch, the spirit fruit went into his stomach. Its essence energy overflowed, and juice splashed everywhere. Yinglong and the other prison overlords tried to persuade him again, but Tiansong ruthlessly refused. Hades Era sat on the ground with a sad face, hugging his father's thigh. However, he couldn't move his father, and he was ruthlessly rejected. At that moment, Nether King Erha only felt sorrow in his heart. It was as if something was broken, and the spicy strips seemed to be leaving him. He couldn't persuade Tiansong. Therefore, Yinglong and the other prison overlords had no choice but to pull Hades Era out of the restaurant. They had to hurry back to Hades' palace and let Hades handle the affairs. After all, the battle between Di Ting and the Lord Go had shaken the world. Now, the situation was urgent, and they needed Hades' presence. Tiansong's expression didn't change when he saw Hades Era lying on the ground and being pulled out of the restaurant by his legs. Sure enough, when a father tricked his son, he didn't show any mercy. Soon, the restaurant quieted down. Bufong closed the restaurant's door, and it didn't open for business. This made the group of diners who were queuing up outside grumble. They had waited for a long time and thought the restaurant would reopen, but it didn't. However, Bufong also told them to rest for the night and open for business the next day. This was what made everyone leave resentfully. Now, only Tiansong, Bufong, and you were left in the restaurant. You held Little Hu in her arms, blinking at Tiansong and Bufong. Tiansong, on the other hand, came to Bufong and began to negotiate. After talking for a while, you had already returned to her room with Little Hu in her arms. Bufong and Tiansong reached an agreement. After the negotiation, Tiansong walked out of the restaurant happily. He turned into a beam of light and flew away toward God Vanishing Mountain. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back, looking at Tiansong's back as he left. He sighed. Old people nowadays, he called you down from upstairs. Bufong cooked dragon blood rice, which was overflowing with spirit essence. Although Yu's state was suppressed by the divine power liquid drop, Bufong still needed to cook some dishes to suppress the curse power. In the restaurant, you held Little Hu and ate happily at the table. Little Hu was also very excited because she also had something to eat. As for Bufong, he sat on a chair, closed his eyes, and began to take a nap. His mind flickered. Then, he entered the heaven and earth farmland. Inside the farmland, the spirit energy was surging. Bufong strolled around. The grass swayed on the ground, making a rustling sound. The 9-revolution Great Path Tea tree was swaying, and its leaves seemed to emit light. On the heaven tree, the senseless lotus was blooming, and its fragrance lingered in the farmland, making people's minds fall into a state of tranquility. The heaven tree, the senseless lotus, and the 9-revolution Great Path Tea tree. These spirit plants decorated the farmland like a fairyland. Bufong went there. He sat cross-legged under the 9-revolution Great Path Tea tree. He closed his eyes and began to consolidate his harvest after the battle. The 9-revolution Great Path Tea tree swayed, sprinkling its light, making Bufong's mind calm down. His divine will surged, as if it was slowly rising. In front of the wooden house, a rocking chair swayed. The river gurgled, and the grass rustled in the wind. Spirit beasts were walking around. The farmland, which had nothing before, now seemed to have become a real world. It made people feel a sense of accomplishment. Buzz in front of the 9-revolution Great Path Tea Tree. All of a sudden, Bufong's cross-legged body burst into golden light. The golden light slowly surged, as if it was wrapping around Bufong. With Bufong's body as the center, waves of golden spirit rippled above Bufong's head. The divine wolf phantom slowly floated up. Its golden eyes were closed, and its mouth was chanting divine sounds. At this moment, Bufong's divine will, which had been stagnant at the first stage, was about to break through. Chapter 1368. The divine will was divided into 3 stages. The power of each stage was different. For example, Bufong's divine will was in the first stage. Once his divine will was sent out, it could cover thousands of miles and detect people's emotions, heartbeats, and other subtle things. But this was only the first stage. At the second stage, the divine will could cover tens of thousands of miles, and it had the power to attack. It could kill people with just a thought. Of course, if one wanted to kill an enemy, they had to face an opponent whose divine will could crush them. As for the third stage, the divine will could cover hundreds of thousands of miles like Tian Song, and with just a thought, it could change the color of heaven and earth and increase the pressure. The divine will of each stage was different, and different divine wills had different effects. However, it was very difficult and slow to improve the divine will. It was very difficult for ordinary people to improve their divine will. After all, the cultivation of divine will was the cultivation of the soul. Unless one was extremely talented, like Tian Song, the cultivation of divine will would be very slow. Above the divine will was the divine sense. Of course, the cultivation of divine sense was divided into different levels. The mental force cultivation method given by the system had a clear classification, but Bufong couldn't pay much attention to it now. However, the strength of his divine sense was far greater than his divine will. It could even cover millions of miles. Of course, the range was not important. What was important was the power of his divine sense. It could move mountains, fill the sea, make it rain, and replace the sun and the moon. This was already considered the real divine power. In a heaven and earth farmland, at this moment, all living beings fell silent. Every single one of them raised their heads and looked at the sky. There, Bufong's divine will phantom spirit appeared. In the netherworld, only the great sage could condense divine will, and it had to be the mighty great sage. Bufong's divine will was very strong, far beyond his realm. Although he was only a 9-revolution little saint, he still had the power of his divine will, and he could even fight the great sage. That was why he was so confident. After using 2 divine power liquid drops, Bufong's mental force was greatly improved. After all, the divine power liquid droplet was a mysterious object that made Bufong feel like he had never felt before. This kind of understanding of the realm in advance was beneficial to the improvement of his cultivation. The 9 revolutions heavenly Tao tea tree swayed gently in the wind. The tree itself was no weaker than the heaven tree. It contained profound mysteries that could help strengthen one's psychic power. The leaves of the tea tree floated down and swirled in the air. Then, he landed on the ground. It was like a wave of ripples that spread continuously. The buzzing sound reverberated endlessly, shaking heaven and earth. The divine will phantom figure opened its eyes and chanted a divine tune, causing the aura between heaven and earth to revolve around it. The heaven tree swayed as leaves spread out from the heaven tree. As it spread, the senseless lotus shone even brighter. Bufong's spiritual will was getting stronger and stronger. He gradually improved and became stronger. Buzz Bufong opened his eyes. In his eyes, there seemed to be thousands of streams of light surging. The cultivation of the divine was not controlled by the system. This was the only thing that Bufang needed to cultivate by himself. For the cultivation of the fleshly body, the system would control it more. He closed his eyes and rested for a long time. Bufang let out a long breath. He stood up from his seat, with the divine phantom figure above his head. The phantom figure was constantly extinguishing, causing the void to shatter unceasingly. He rubbed his chin. Bufang's mind flickered. The vortexes in his spirit sea began to spin at the same time. Then, Bufang stepped out of the heaven and earth farmland. He began to collect all kinds of ingredients. In front of the wooden hut, Nyo-Han-san, who was sitting on a rocking chair, suddenly widened his eyes. He seemed a little confused. On a booze state. Isn't he breaking through? Why did he start to cook when he's breaking through? Why is he so willful? Nyo-Han-san didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had sensed that Bufang was still breaking through, and the entire heaven and earth farmland's momentum had become very great. He didn't expect that Bufang was actually collecting ingredients in the heaven and earth farmland under such great pressure. This was really, however, thinking that Bufang was collecting ingredients to cook delicious food. Nyo-Han-san couldn't sit still. He could ignore Bufang's breakthrough, but when it came to Bufang's cooking, then he couldn't ignore it. Even if he had to suck up to him, he had to ask for a few mouthfuls of food. Hence, Nyo-Han-san eagerly followed him. Bufang kept walking in the heaven and earth farmland. His eyes flickered with radiance, and the aura around him was simply too strong. Nyo-Han-san couldn't get close to him. What did Bufang want to do? Nyo-Han-san didn't understand. However, he saw Bufang gesticulating in front of many ingredients. He had collected a lot of ingredients and gathered them together, turning them into a spinning ball in his hand. That ball was filled with liquid droplets of primal chaos. What was that? Nyo-Han-san was bewildered. He didn't seem to recognize what kind of delicacy Bufang was going to cook. Plop, plop. Bufang picked a few vermilion fruits from the orchard. The fiery vermilion fruits were burning like flames. They were caught by Bufang. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared. With a flash of knife light, the vermilion fruits were cut, turning into cubes of fruit. Bufang took out the black turtle constellation wok, and a flame burned in the air. The wok was filled with the spring of life. As the spring of life surged, Bufang threw the spirit fat he had collected into the wok, causing it to boil continuously. This spirit fat was something special. Bufang had specially collected the 9-revolution Great Path tea tree. He had extracted a kind of lipid droplet from the tea tree's spirit liquid. After pouring it into the wok and boiling, one could feel a strange energy surging within it. The fire was not an ordinary fire. It was a fire ignited by a broken branch of the heaven tree. As the fire burned, the energy within it continuously flowed into the black turtle constellation wok, seeping into the boiling soup. As it boiled after a long time, Bufang extinguished the fire. Then, he placed the shredded vermilion fruit into the pot. Then, he took out the blue and white porcelain bowls. The bowls were very big, and he filled them to the brim. Bufang's divine will moved. After sucking out the steam around the 3 bowls, the surrounding temperature began to drop rapidly. As the temperature dropped, the soup in the bowls began to solidify. In just a short while, it became a transparent food. Nyo-Han-san saw it clearly from below, but he didn't know much. Jing Yuan and many other apprentices also came to the heaven and earth farmland. They looked at Bufang's cooking in the sky. They were also confused. However, Jing Yuan, after all, had the foundation of cooking iced drinks. She recognized that Bufang's cooking method was similar to that of iced drinks. However, there were some differences. Bufang's face was expressionless. He grabbed the porcelain bowls. He turned them upside down in the air, then pulled them out. When the porcelain bowls were opened, they all trembled. The transparent ingredients were as tender as a young girl's skin. Moreover, they were extremely transparent. The vermilion fruit's flesh was floating in the ingredients. They were tender and bouncy. Bufang flicked out a stream of true energy. When the true energy hit the ingredient, it actually caused the ingredient to tremble violently as though it was rippling. The flesh seemed to be floating, which was too beautiful to behold. It was a very dazzling delicacy. It was like a crystal that attracted people's eyes. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in Bu Fang's hand. Bu Fang grabbed the knife, slashing down. Like a meteor, the blade light continuously shot down, causing the ingredients to be sliced into small pieces by the blade. These small pieces looked quite cute. And at this moment, Bu Fang's cooking was completed. It was a very unique cooking. At least, Nyohan-san and the others were confused. What is Onarbu doing? It should be an iced drink. It looks so delicious. Jing Yuan licked her lips, eager to try. She couldn't control her inner desire for new iced drinks. Bu Fang landed. He landed under the path understanding tree. He sat cross-legged, closing his eyes. Pieces of jelly floated around him. That's right. This was Bu Fang's secret vermilion fruit-flavored spirit jelly. It was also the jelly that Bu Fang had specially made to help him break through to the divine will realm. He had just remembered it. Actually, compared to others, his advantage was his cooking skills. Why didn't he use his cooking skills to increase his cultivation base? Among the many ingredients, he chose to make jelly. This jelly was different from the jelly in his previous life. It didn't have any preservatives. It was a pure, natural, and pollution-free delicacy. Moreover, he used many precious ingredients to make it. The 9 Revolution Great Path Tea Tree, vermilion fruit, heaven tree, and so on. The jelly formed by mixing so many ingredients was naturally extraordinary. Bu Fang closed his eyes, his divine will phantom hovering in the air. However, as time passed, his divine will phantom became more majestic and solid. His mind flickered. Bu Fang opened his eyes. He reached out his hand, pinching a piece of jelly with his thumb and index finger, then shoved it into his mouth. Buzz, as the jelly entered his mouth, the springy texture made Bu Fang's eyes brighten. The cool and refreshing feeling also made Bu Fang's mind clear at this moment. As he bit down, the jelly rubbed against his mouth. There was also a sweet taste, which made Bu Fang's mind sober. Buzz, Bu Fang's divine will phantom suddenly became solid. The originally blurry divine sense phantom seemed to have solidified at this moment. With the help of the jelly, it became easier to cultivate his mental force. Boom! The divine will phantom opened its mouth, as if it was roaring. The sound rushed up to the sky. It was so deafening that it made people's hearts tremble. At this moment, Bu Fang's divine will completely broke free from the shackles, stepping into a new realm. The area covered by his divine will kept expanding. From thousands of miles, it expanded to tens of thousands of miles. This kind of improvement in divine will was terrifying. The pressure of his divine will spread out, causing everyone to feel incomparably fearful, as if their minds were trembling. Nyohan-san took a deep breath, looking at Bu Fang. His eyes were filled with more amazement and awe. As for the apprentice chefs, when they looked at Bu Fang, they were naturally fanatical and respectful. Onarbu's current cultivation base had already reached a level that they didn't dare to imagine. Bu Fang opened his eyes. The divine will phantom had returned to his body. At the same time, Bu Fang's aura had become much more solid. He grabbed a piece of jelly and shoved it into his mouth. The springy texture made Bu Fang's mind tremble slightly. The energy in the jelly seemed to turn into threads, constantly nourishing Bu Fang's body and spirit. It made Bu Fang feel that his mental force was in a state of steady improvement. Nether Prison. The D-Ting clan's land, the experts of the 9 clans had all gathered here. They sat down below and looked respectfully at the figure shrouded in black smoke sitting on the high throne. That was D-Ting, the strongest expert in Nether Prison today. He was a demigod, D-Ting. However, no one dared to breathe loudly, even the 9 Revolution Great Sage. D-Ting's power was simply too strong. It made their hearts tremble with fear. How are the preparations for the Netherworld to become a great world going? D-Ting's voice was mellow, and it eased many people's tension. However, the great sage did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly said, before His Excellency woke up, we had incorporated dozens of small worlds in the Netherworld, including first-class small worlds like the West Little Buddhism Realm and the Wingman Valley. Wherever our nether prison cavalry went, no one could stop us. We conquered the netherworld and shocked the world. Get to the point, Di Ting said lightly. He was too lazy to listen to these people's bragging. He needed to know the point. The great sage cleared his throat and said, "Except for Earth Prison, there is an inconspicuous small world left, and that is the Heaven Chief Realm. Apart from these two, all the other small worlds in the netherworld have been incorporated. In other words, only Earth Prison and the Heaven Chief Realm are left. I originally wanted to unify all the small worlds in the netherworld, then begin to advance them into great worlds, condense the will of the great path, and draw the power of the laws. Now it seems that this may not work." Di Ting murmured. Earth Prison had Earth Prison Dog, but the Heaven Chief Realm had the Heaven Tree. Others might not know the details of the Heaven Tree, but he knew it very well. He knew the secrets of the Heaven Chief Realm better than others. Therefore, he might have to give up on the Heaven Chief Realm and Earth Prison. Di Ting pondered as if he was calculating something. After a long time, he let out a long breath. "I can't wait. In that case, I'll ignore Earth Prison and the Heaven Chief Realm, gather the other small worlds, and begin to break through the great worlds." Chapter 1369. Break Through to a Great World. Truth listeners' words shocked everyone present. This behavior was simply too crazy. In fact, none of them knew how to break through to a great world, for it was all arranged by Di Ting. As the strongest expert in Nether Prison, Di Ting arranged everything, and he was the first to convey the idea of integrating the netherworld and making it break through to a great world. But didn't he say that Earth Prison and Heaven Chief Realm had to be integrated under Nether Prison before they could break through? Could they still succeed without Earth Prison and Heaven Chief Realm? What was Patriarch Di Ting so anxious about? Why did things seem to be developing in such a hurry? The patriarchs of the great sage of Nether Prison were no fools. They could naturally sense the urgency coming from Di Ting. That made them suspicious. However, Di Ting didn't explain too much to them. He just asked his subordinates to do as he said and passed the message to the great sage. It was not easy to integrate all the small worlds to break through to a great world. Every pocket world had its own will of the heavenly Tao. This will of the heavenly Tao formed the rules of each pocket world. Great worlds, on the other hand, were different. No matter how many small worlds there were, they were scattered. It was not as simple as raising one's arm and calling for the establishment of a great world. A lot of preparation was needed. First of all, the will of the great path of each small world needed to be sorted out. This sorting was not a fusion, and it took a long time. After that, a dominant will of the great path would connect the other wills of the great path, so that these scattered wills of the great path would have a unified leader. This leader was the main body of a great world. There was no doubt that the main body of the great netherworld was Nether Prison. Earth Prison, on the other hand, had been eliminated. Apart from that, it also needed to trigger the power of the laws. The power of the laws in the universe was mysterious and unfathomable. Only by obtaining the recognition of the power of the laws could a great world become a great world. Di Ting's knowledge was much broader than that of many people. He knew that there were many great worlds in the starry sky, and these great worlds were very vast. That man once said that this world was made up of 3,000 great worlds, and only by jumping out of them could one be eternal. Di Ting didn't understand at that time, but after experiencing that great tribulation, he understood what that man meant. If one did not become a great world, one would always be an ant, a frog sitting in a hole and looking at the sky. They didn't know the vastness of heaven and earth. Buzz, the Harkin's order was issued. The others might not have been able to comprehend it. However, out of their zeal for dieting, they still accepted the order and went to work. For a moment, the whole Nether Prison was stirred up. With Nether Prison as the center, the storm swept through many small worlds around it. Of course, hell and Heaven Chief realms seemed to be isolated by the storm and were not affected in the slightest. Everything was progressing in an orderly manner. Bufong's breakthrough was complete. The breakthrough of his divine will could be said to have improved Bufong's culinary skills. The heaven and earth farmland could be considered a pure land for Bufong, and all of Bufong's cultivation seemed to be based on the heaven and earth farmland. It was just like the small worlds created by the great sage. The great sage's minor world was illusory. Although it wasn't large, it was still corporeal. It could condense the will of the heavenly path. As for Bufong's heaven and earth farmland, it had already exceeded the scope of the great sage's imagination. Its vastness was not weaker than that of the average 9-revolution great sage. Back in the restaurant, Bufong walked out of the kitchen. In the restaurant, Yu and Little Hu had already eaten their fill, and the remaining cups and bowls were placed on the table. Bufong collected the cups and bowls, went to the kitchen, and washed them in the automatic dishwasher. Then, he returned to his room. He took a hot bath and felt the comfortable feeling of the hot water flowing through his skin. All his fatigue seemed to be washed away at this moment. That feeling was indescribable. After the bath and waiting for his hair to dry naturally, Bufong leaned against the window, raised a glass, and swirled the wine in it. Sipping the wine, he enjoyed the beautiful night view of Acheron City. After drinking a glass of wine, Bufong lay down on the bed. The sound of orderly breathing rang out, and Bufong fell into a deep sleep. At Bufong's level, sleep was no longer important to him, but he still needed to rest. Bufong could even stay awake for a long time. However, Bufong still kept this habit. For Bufong, he only cared about the process of sleeping, which made him feel at ease. That was why he liked to sleep. The next day, Bufong opened the door of the restaurant. After a few days, Acheron's restaurant opened again. The diners went crazy. The experts of the aristocratic families who stayed in Acheron City lined up like crazy, wanting to be the first to taste Bufong's dishes. Hades Tenzang hadn't returned yet. About 3 days later, Tian Song hurried back and landed in front of the restaurant. He had agreed with Bufong that he would leave for 3 days. Now it was time. Tian Song was a man of his word, so he left his gentle home and came to the restaurant to work as a waiter. The fact that Hades Tenzang worked as a waiter terrified many of the aristocratic family's juniors, as if they had seen a ghost. Therefore, many strange things often happened in the restaurant. For example, Tian Song would bring a dish to a table. All the people at the table would stand up and bow respectfully to him. No matter how hard Tian Song tried to stop them, they couldn't. They couldn't accept Tian Song's service calmly. He was the former ruler of Earth Prison, an invincible existence. This situation caused the order in the restaurant to fall apart. However, Bufong knew that it was normal, and he would get used to it after a while. And that was the truth. When the news that Tian Song had become a waiter in the restaurant spread, everyone went crazy. All the experts of Earth Prison rushed to Acheron City like crazy people. Acheron City became more and more glorious because of this. Great Sage Acheron returned. He held the jade jar and strolled around the restaurant. He enjoyed the dishes and wine, feeling very comfortable. This kind of life had long replaced eating grass, becoming something that made him happy. Hades' era, the Earth Prison overlords, and the other experts kept coming. Although Tian Song didn't agree to become Hades' waiter, they were still very respectful to him. As a result, Acheron City gradually developed into one of the 3 central cities of Earth Prison. Acheron City was also constantly expanding. The barren Acheron City gradually expanded, with all kinds of high-rise buildings rising from the ground. The migration of people was dense and numerous. Bufong also enjoyed this kind of life. During the day, he practiced cooking, and at night, he would leave the restaurant and stroll around Acheron City, enjoying all kinds of Earth Prison delicacies. Sometimes he would think about how to cook new dishes. Being a chef required a lot of imagination. Only with a rich imagination could one constantly create new dishes. Time passed, and time flowed. Time was always passing in this kind of life. 3 years later, Lord Go returned. As soon as he entered the restaurant, the first thing he shouted was sweet and sour ribs. Lord Go finally stabilized his cultivation base and made a lot of progress. His eyes flickered as if they were about to destroy the starry sky. What happened during these 3 years was beyond the expectations of all Earth Prison people. Strangely enough, Nether Prison didn't do anything. There was no invasion or war. Everything became very peaceful. This was somewhat strange. Did both sides really choose to develop peacefully because of a battle? Of course, it would be better if they developed peacefully. The experts of Earth Prison were eager to see that. 3 years passed, and another 3 years passed. This was the longest time Bufong had spent in this world. He spent a total of 9 years in Acheron's little restaurant. Occasionally, he would close the restaurant and leave Acheron's little restaurant, asking you to drive the Netherworld ship through the ancient cities of Earth Prison in search of Earth Prison's delicacies. Sometimes he would travel through the lofty mountains and the land full of danger, looking for rare game and delicacies. It was indeed a good feeling to experience Earth Prison's customs. Along the way, Bufong had learned a lot, and his cooking skills had improved greatly. These 9 years were 9 years for Earth Prison to recover, and it was also 9 years for Bufong to consolidate his cooking skills and cultivate his character. Hades' era, on the other hand, was forced to step into the Demon King Pass again. Hades' Tenzang, Inglong, and Earth Prison overlords forced him to break through the remaining 3 Demon King passes. In the 8th year, Hades' era finally broke through, and his cultivation base smoothly rushed into the 9 Revolution Great Sage. It was fast, but it was not easy. It was very difficult to break through the Demon King Pass, and there was even the risk of death. However, Tian Tsung was happy that Hades' era could break through. The rest of the time was used to consolidate his cultivation base. After breaking through the Demon King Pass, Hades' era only had one dream left in his life, and that was to eat spicy strips, an endless supply of spicy strips. 9 years to Earth Prison was just a blink of an eye. When one's cultivation base reached the Saint Realm, one's lifespan was extremely long. However, 9 years was not a short time, at least for Bufong. His restaurant had gained an accumulation of time, which belonged to the accumulation of sales. The system sales had reached a critical point, and Bufong had a feeling that he was about to break through. This was because Bufong did not cook any strange dishes. He did not receive many nether crystals either. This kind of natural breakthrough was the norm. On this day, the Netherworld ship tore through the sky, hovering in the middle of Acheron, which was filled with high-rise buildings. Bufong and the others landed in front of Acheron City. Foxy had already grown quite a bit. It had also condensed a new tail, going from 3 to 4. Its strength had also become a lot stronger after being nurtured by countless delicious dishes. Flowery had found Earth Prison from a mortal chef little store, so she came here herself. The 7-colored sky devouring Python's cultivation base had increased a lot. Perhaps it was because of the food. Hua's appearance had become even more charming. Her cultivation base had also reached the Great Sage Realm. After all, the 7-colored sky devouring Python was an ancient savage beast. When it reached adulthood, its strength would not be weaker than the Lord Go. In other words, as soon as Hua reached adulthood, she would have the strength of the Great Sage Realm. Of course, Bufong would not let go of such a strong potential stock. Moreover, as Hua grew up, this little girl became even more beautiful. She had even become a beautiful scene in Acheron City. She attracted the attention of countless people. Countless people swarmed into Acheron's restaurant just to see her. However, this little girl Hua was indeed the descendant of a savage beast. She was incomparably cold and arrogant, even colder than Bufong. After learning how to strip clothes from Xiaobai, she did all the work. Every day, she would do something to strip clothes tap, 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 walking on the streets of Acheron City. At night, the streets were filled with a rich aroma, which came from the stalls on the street. These stalls all opened at night, which was similar to the barbecue stalls that Bufong had set up in the Heaven Chief realm. Yu, Hua, and Bufong walked slowly. Foxy, on the other hand, happily wagged its 4 tails and bounced on the road. The Snow White Fox's appearance was very attractive. At night, in Acheron's restaurant, the door of the restaurant was also open. In front of the door, all the celebrities and noble ladies of Acheron City had gathered. They surrounded the restaurant with fanaticism. During the day, they didn't dare to do anything, fearing that they would be labeled as troublemakers and thrown away. But at night, they would go crazy. It was because of Tian Song, the waiter of the restaurant, who was known as the Lady Killer. These ladies were all infatuated with Tian Song. Tian Song was helpless about this. In fact, he wanted to be a low-key waiter, facing the sea and enjoying the spring. He wanted to live a peaceful life. However, his handsome face was destined to be extraordinary. Even if he was just an ordinary waiter, he could shine like a piece of gold in the dark. Bang! The door of the restaurant was closed. It isolated Hades' Tenzang from the screaming celebrities and noble ladies. Even Bu Fong and the others, who had just returned from their trip, were used to it. Lord Go was lying under the path understanding tree, sleeping soundly. Even though he had become a demigod, Lord Go was as lazy as ever. His body was growing more and more horizontally. Bu Fong entered the restaurant and cooked sweet-in, sour ribs, dragon blood rice, and other delicacies. After eating and drinking their fill, everyone returned to their respective rooms. They began to prepare for a new day. In the boundless starry sky, suddenly a ripple spread out. A silver-white metal warship seemed to be slowly moving out of the depths of the starry sky. The warship was exquisitely made, and every part seemed to be exquisitely carved. It was a huge warship divided into 9 floors, glowing with a pale blue light. The sides of the warship were surrounded by a layer of energy shield, which protected the metal warship. Creak, at the top of the warship, a metal door slowly opened from the bottom to the top. A figure walked out of the warship with his hands clasped behind his back. Standing at the front of the warship, his eyes looked straight at the starry sky. His field of vision instantly widened, and the scene in front of him was the vast nether prison continent, a newly born great world. Is it here? What a pity. 9 years ago, when that man gave us the coordinates and led us here, it was still a scattered small world. I thought I'd found a treasure, but I didn't expect that 10 years later, it had become a great world recognized by the law of the starry sky. It's really amazing. Chapter 1370. Early in the morning, sunlight shone down from the heavens. It was extremely clear and shone on the ground. It was as if the ground was draped in a golden garment. White clouds hovered in the sky, blocking the sunlight from time to time, casting shadows on the ground. Early in the morning, Acheron City was bustling with activity even before the sun rose. After 9 years of development, Acheron City, which used to be barren, had become the largest city in Earth Prison. Rows upon rows of skyscrapers filled the city, and the roads on the ground were connected to each other. Creaking sounds rang out incessantly. It was the sound of the shop owner and his employees opening the door. Below the skyscrapers were shops. As the city grew, the population grew. Naturally, the number of shops increased as the population increased. Many shops lined both sides of the street, making Acheron City even more lively and bustling. Walking along the bustling shops toward the center, one could see a small shop that was packed with people. The shop wasn't big, but it was located in the center of Acheron City. Many shops were built and developed around this small shop. It was still early in the morning. In front of the store, there was a large number of people. These people were talking and laughing, as if they were all very familiar with each other and were chatting. If someone were to see these people at this moment, they would definitely be shocked. This was because the people in front of the store all had high statuses and identities in the infernal realm. Some were hell overlords, some were heads of aristocratic families, and some were high-ranking members of major clans. Every one of these people was very prominent in a big city. But now, all of them were wrapped in thick clothes and lined up in front of the shop early in the morning. Creak! The door of the shop opened. The people who were chatting and laughing just a moment ago became spirited and looked at the restaurant excitedly. The door of the shop was opened. What was revealed was an incomparably handsome face. This face was filled with indifference and coldness. His majestic body contained unparalleled power. Everyone who saw this figure, no matter how illustrious their status was, they all bowed respectfully towards this figure. This kind of situation had already happened countless times. Even so, these experts were still enjoying themselves. "Good morning, Lord Tian Song." Orderly greetings came from the mouths of the experts. Tian Song's face was gentle, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he nodded at the crowd. "The restaurant is open for business. Everyone, please line up in an orderly manner. Do not jump the queue," Tian Song said with a smile. After being a waiter for so many years, he already knew everything about a waiter. One by one, the diners stepped into the restaurant in an orderly manner. With the highly respected Lord Tian Song as a waiter, these people naturally did not dare to act rashly. As soon as they entered the restaurant, they began to order their dishes. Tian Song's face was still gentle. He used a small notebook to record down the dishes ordered by everyone. Then, he walked to the kitchen and told the thin figure hidden in the kitchen about the contents of the order. Buzz, the sound of flames burning resounded in their ears, and everyone became spirited. Honorbu started cooking. The aroma of the dishes soon wafted out from the kitchen. After a while, Bu Fong walked out of the kitchen. He was carrying a 6-layer steamer. "Here comes the steamed buns ignored by God." Bu Fong's faint voice rang out in the kitchen. Bu Fong hugged the steamer basket and leaned sideways. His entire body seemed to be covered by the steamer basket. Bu Fong placed the steamer on the table in front of the kitchen. Then, he lifted the lid of the steamer. Immediately, steaming hot air surged out of the steamer, as if it had turned into a huge wave of air that was churning. Bu Fong grabbed a pair of jade chopsticks. With sharp eyes and nimble hands, he took the steamed buns out of the steamer and placed them in a blue and white porcelain bowl the size of a palm. Then, he gave one to Hades Tenzang. Tian Song took the steamed buns and placed them in front of each customer. Nowadays, the steamed buns ignored by God had become a must-order delicacy in Acheron's restaurant every morning. On the blue and white porcelain plate, a steamed bun as white as jade was emitting steam. The surface of the steamed bun was round and semicircular. There were 9 folds on it, and the space between each fold was the same. In the middle of the folds, there was a whirlpool which looked quite cute. A bald diner looked at the steamed buns, drooling uncontrollably. He swallowed his saliva and reached out to grab the steamed bun in his hand. The steamed bun was so hot that he couldn't help but toss it with both hands. Then, he eagerly opened his mouth and took a bite. With a single bite, the soft and tender skin of the bun was immediately bitten through. The skin of the bun became thicker and thicker, and with a single bite, oil dripped out. The rich oil flowed down his lips, dripped down his chin, and dripped onto the dining table. Slurp! The customer hurriedly took a deep breath, sucking all the oil flowing out of the steamed bun into his mouth. The thick, meaty aroma filled his mouth. As he bit down, what he bit down was the filling of the steamed bun. The filling of the steamed bun was brown and finely chopped. The oil floated in it, and the milky white skin of the steamed bun looked very stimulating to the taste buds. After taking a bite, the customer was instantly intoxicated. He squinted his eyes, feeling the feeling of the ingredients moving in his mouth. Munch, munch. In the restaurant, every diner, sitting in their seats, couldn't wait to eat. In an instant, the only thing lingering in the restaurant was the fragrance of the steamed bun. It was an incomparably tantalizing fragrance. After Bu Fong finished distributing the steamed bun in the 6-layer steamer, he used a clean cloth to wipe the water stains on his hands. Carrying the steamer, he returned to the kitchen. The steamed bun ignored by God was a brand new delicacy developed by Bu Fong. The steamed bun was infused with the will of the Great Path, and the ingredients used were also top-notch. The taste was very good. God ignored. It meant that when God was eating the steamed bun, he wouldn't care about people. It was enough to show how delicious the steamed bun was. The sound of the spatula and the black turtle constellation wok colliding was clear and melodious, reverberating in the kitchen. There was also the sizzling sound of water being poured into the hot wok. The beautiful scene in the kitchen made the customers in the restaurant more and more expectant. The time spent waiting for delicious food was always worrying. After a while, ring, ring, he heard the curtain of the kitchen door being lifted. Hua held the dishes and walked out the kitchen window. Dishes after dishes were placed on the table. The bustling Acheron's little restaurant began another day of hard work. The silver battleship floated in the starry sky. Stars moved behind it, forming a sky curtain. The figure standing on the top deck of the battleship clasped his hands, looking at the nether prison continent in front of him. The corners of his mouth rose slightly. He stretched out his hand. Then he snapped his fingers. Instantly, the moment the snapping sound disappeared, the battleship behind him began to change. A clanging sound rang out. There was a huge gap on the side of the battleship, and a series of rumbling noises resounded from a gap. Silver metal puppets flew out from within the formation. The nether prison continent has just become a great world. I'll go visit it. As for you guys, do your best to explore the great netherworld and draw a virtual map, that figure said faintly. The mechanical eyes of those metal puppets flashed. Then, a rumbling sound rang out. The next moment, they turned into streams of light and sped away. The metal puppets were moving. Perhaps it was because they were moving too fast, causing white steam to spurt out from their butts. A buzzing sound rang out. One by one, the puppets flew toward the surrounding small worlds. Wandering Soul Realm. A silver puppet floated outside the wandering soul realm. Its mechanical eyes flashed. Then, a metal plate flipped open on its chest, from which beams of light shot out, turning into a huge light curtain that scanned the entire wandering soul realm. However, the experts in the wandering soul realm didn't sense it at all. It was the same in the Vajra realm. The movements of these metal puppets were very consistent. They floated outside the small world, with beams of light bursting out of their chests, constantly scanning the small world. As they scanned, some virtual patterns emerged in the eyes of these silver puppets. These patterns were the topographic maps of each small world. They were very vivid, and they clearly marked the population and the strength of the experts in each small world. If anyone saw this scene, they would definitely be very shocked because this method seemed to be even more bizarre than the divine sense scanning. Winged Man Valley. The beautiful winged clan girl flapped her wings and gathered honey from the flowers. Suddenly, every winged person in the Winged Man Valley seemed to feel a strange will. They all raised their heads and looked into the distance. There, a white cylindrical beam of light rose into the sky. Boom! 12 wings spread open, and pure white feathers fluttered down. The Winged Man Valley Master, an expert who had reached the perfected Great Sage Realm, looked into the sky with a grave face. His strength was far superior to the Winged Man Valley, so he sensed a strange fluctuation outside the valley. Who dares to explore my Winged Man Valley so unscrupulously? The Winged Man Valley Master bellowed. His 12 wings flapped at the same time. Then, he shot into the starry sky and sped toward the starry sky. He turned into a small dot and quickly approached. Soon, he saw the metal puppet hovering in the sky. The fluctuation of the puppet's scanning surprised him slightly. How dare you? With a roar, the Winged Man Valley Master threw a punch. It was a sacred punch. It represented justice, and it wanted to destroy everything. Buzz, the metal puppet's eyes flashed, and its scanning fluctuation swept across the Winged Man Valley Master's body. Ding! Ding! A perfected Great Sage Realm expert with a weak Winged Man bloodline from the Great Holy World, the metal puppet's mechanical voice rang out. The next moment, boom, the sacred punch landed and drowned everything. When everything returned to normal, the Winged Man Valley Master looked at it in disbelief. The metal puppet was unscathed. He was a perfected Great Sage, but his punch couldn't do anything to it? He couldn't believe that the power of a punch from a perfected Great Sage Realm expert couldn't do anything to the puppet. Apart from Earth Prison's Hades Tenzing, was there any other puppet in this world that was so powerful? The metal puppet slightly tilted its head, then raised one of its arms. A clanging sound rang out. Immediately, numerous cold metal holes aimed at the wingman Valley Master. Boom! A deafening rumble rang out. A rumbling sound erupted from the metal hole, and sparks surged from within. The mechanical arm trembled from the recoil. Tiny energy cannons that looked like marbles shot toward the wingman Valley Master. How dare you? The wingman Valley Master flew into a rage. With a thought, the holy sword appeared in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the sword fell and slashed at the metal cannons. Boom! 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 However, the wingman Valley Master had just waved his sword. A terrible explosion broke out when the metal cannons hit him. The wingman Valley Master had the cultivation base of a perfected Great Sage Realm expert, but he was seriously injured before he could use it. Countless feathers fell from his head. A ripping sound rang out. The metal puppet approached, threw a metal net, and grabbed the winged man Valley Master. White flames shot out as the puppet turned around and sped toward the silver warship in the starry sky. Not only the winged man Valley Master, the Vajra realm, the West Little Buddhism realm, all the other small worlds were invaded by these metal puppets. Some experts discovered them and came out to fight back, but they were all bombarded and captured without being able to resist. At this moment, the defenses of many small worlds in the great netherworld were silently broken. On the silver warship, on a silver chair, the tall and sturdy figure sat peacefully. He held a metal plate in his hand, which was displaying the information scanned by the metal puppets. TSK. It's indeed a remote and heterogeneous small world. It has the bloodline of those birdmen from the great sacred world and the inheritance of those bald monks from the great West Heaven world. The man touched his chin and grinned. Unfortunately, they're all too weak. Looking at the images on the metal plate, the man chuckled. What a barren place. There are only a few Great Sage Realm experts, and each of them is too weak. Wait a minute. Outside the great netherworld, there are two other small worlds? Is this a joke? They can't even incorporate two small worlds that are so close to each other. This new great world is too weak. The man narrowed his eyes as he read the information on the metal plate. Inside the metal plate, his metal puppet was hovering in front of a huge continent. According to the information, the people of this great world called this continent Hell. Chapter 1371. Earth Prison? The corners of the man's mouth curled upward as he looked at the metal panel with interest. The panel hadn't sent him any information about the small world called Earth Prison. However, he wasn't in a hurry. As soon as the puppet finished scanning, the information about that small world would be sent to his metal panel. At that time, he would know why that small world was independent of the great world. Oh, besides Earth Prison, there was another small world called the Heaven Chief Realm, which was also independent of the great netherworld. It's getting funnier and funnier. Does this great netherworld want to make me die of laughter? It seems that it knew I would come, so it formed the great world in advance to get the recognition of the universal law to guard against me. The man's index finger gently touched the metal panel. His eyes seemed to have some light flashing. Sizzle, with a clanging sound, the metal door of the silver battleship opened from the bottom up. Then, a woman in revealing clothes walked out of the silver battleship. The woman seemed to be a servant. She was holding a tray in her hand, and on the tray was a glass of fruit juice that was sparkling and translucent. Your Excellency, here's your orange juice. The woman was beautiful, but her eyes were a little dull. She looked at the man sitting on the chair as if she was looking at a piece of raw meat. Good. You'll be rewarded. The man took the orange juice and didn't even look at the woman. When the woman heard that she would be rewarded, her eyes brightened. Go to the bottom and feed my pets. Then I'll reward you with a meal. The man raised his head, his eyes falling on the woman. The corners of his mouth curled upward as he reached out his hand, caressing the woman's flat and smooth belly. The woman didn't move. Her eyes returned to their stagnant state. She nodded. The woman turned around and stepped back into the silver battleship, heading to the bottom of the battleship. Roars resounded from the bottom of the battleship. The man chuckled. Looking at the graceful figure of the woman disappearing, his eyes slightly narrowed. Oh, there's a reaction. The man's eyes returned to the metal panel, and his eyes brightened. His metal puppets were finally going to start scanning the small world called Hell. Earth Prison in Acheron's store. It was still incomparably bustling. Many diners were enthusiastically eating their delicacies. Hades era crossed his legs and sat face to face with the great sage Acheron. He held a chili strip in his mouth as he leaned back on a chair in the restaurant. He held the chili strip in one hand and moved it in and out of his mouth. The great sage Acheron narrowed his eyes as he held the jade jar in his hand. The wine contained within the jade jar was something that he treasured greatly. In addition to the spicy strips, Hades era also ordered a portion of fish with pickled cabbage and chili. The fish with pickled cabbage and chili was also a new dish introduced by Bu Fong in the past 9 years. In fact, it was not new, but a new dish. He used a brand new cooking method to interpret this fish with pickled cabbage and chili. It made the fish with pickled cabbage and chili even more delicious. Eating the chili strip and the fish with pickled cabbage and chili had a unique flavor. For this brand new cooking method, Bu Fong had chosen the fat fish in the heaven and earth farmland. Because the fish had been soaked in the spring of life, it had become extraordinary. Moreover, with the farmland's will of the great path, its meat was no longer an ordinary fat fish. When cooked, even the great sage would fall in love with it. As for this dish, it was also a popular dish in the store. Many people came to the restaurant just to taste this dish. All of a sudden, Hades era, who was sitting on a chair, narrowed his eyes. He glanced at the great sage Acheron, then raised his head to look at the sky. He seemed to feel a strange aura hovering in the starry sky. Not only him, but many people in Earth Prison also felt it. Great sage Acheron, Tian Song, and Lord Go, who was lying under the Path Understanding tree, all sensed that strange aura. Acheron, I'll be back soon. Leave some for I, Hades era said with a smile. Then he said something to Tian Song and walked out of the restaurant. Tian Song gently looked at Hades era's back as he left. Without saying anything, he turned to the kitchen window and began to serve the dishes on the table. Hades era walked out of the restaurant. His feet touched the ground of Acheron's city, but he didn't cause the slightest commotion. Then he soared into the sky. He broke through the clouds and came out of the starry sky. Hades era's strength was not bad. He had reached the 9 Revolution Great Sage realm, and his fighting prowess was very formidable. He held the chili strip between his lips. Hades era narrowed his eyes and looked at the floating dot in the distance. It looks familiar. Isn't that Lord White's relative? Hades era said in surprise as he looked at the metal puppet. Its chest split open and a beam of light shot out. The metal puppet, which was about to scan Hades era, suddenly froze. Its mechanical eyes glanced around and fell on Hades era. It didn't do anything else. The beam of light shot out from its chest again. It included Hades era and scanned him together. Buzz. Hades era froze with the chili strip between his lips. After being scanned by the metal puppet, he felt his entire body tremble, as if he was being seen through by an invisible force. You're scanning. Nether King Air furrowed his eyes. I can't believe you dared to scan Earth Prison within my jurisdiction. Do you know who's protecting Earth Prison now? The spicy strip in Nether King Air Ha's mouth moved up and down. Then, Nether King Air Ha's figure moved. His figure turned into a blur, disappearing into the sky in a flash. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the metal puppet. Boom! He punched it. It struck the metal golem's chest. However, Hades era's confident punch didn't budge the puppet at all. How is this possible? Why is it so hard? Hades era sucked in a cold breath. With his strength as a 9 Revolution Great Sage, he couldn't even shake the puppet? Where did this puppet come from? Hades era's eyes narrowed. He thought the puppet was sent by Nether Puppeteer Patriarch to monitor Earth Prison. Hades Era had no interest in Nether Puppeteer Patriarch Hades Era. His mind flickered. The Hades armor and the Hades halberd appeared in his hands. In the silver warship, he had scanned Hades Era as well. The man sitting in the chair and holding the metal plate exclaimed with interest. "Oh, what an arrogant small world. The scan hasn't even started, and there are already people rushing out. Is this the native of Earth Prison? Interesting." The man's lips curled into a smile as his fingers lightly tapped on the metal plate. "In that case, I'll let my little cutie play with you." The man chuckled, then entered a lot of information into the metal plate. His finger moved across the surface of the metal plate. In the starry sky, Hades Era, who was confronting the metal puppet, sensed the change in the puppet. It was a change in its attitude. A creaking sound rang out. Suddenly, cannons emerged on the metal puppet's arms. The cannons were aimed at Hades Era. Hades Era felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't dare to underestimate the puppet anymore. Hades clenched his halberd. This metal puppet was an enemy. It attacked him at the slightest disagreement, bringing him a terrible crisis. If it wasn't an enemy, what was it? Boom! A loud explosion rang out. Instantly, a golden energy beam shot out from the cannon. Hades Era's hair stood on end. That energy beam looked very familiar, and its power was extremely terrifying. Hades wielded his halberd. The halberd swept out. Instantly, a halberd light streaked across the starry sky. It collided with the golden energy beam. An explosion rang out. Terrifying waves of air blasted out. Hades Era instantly felt his body being hit by a tremendous force. He was forced to retreat in the starry sky. The spicy strip in his mouth trembled as he shook it off. So strong. Hades Era hurried to take out another spicy strip, holding it in his mouth. Narrowing his eyes, he stared at the metal puppet and took a deep breath. He had escaped from the Demon King Pass, which was set up by Hades Tenzang to help him improve his cultivation base. Hades Tenzang didn't treat Hades Era as his son when he set up this thing. It was a complete masochism. However, the benefits were obvious. Hades Era's combat skills improved rapidly. Boom! Boom! The metal puppet didn't succeed in its first attack. A moment later, it made another move. On one of its arms, 6 thick cannons emerged, all aimed at Hades Era. A moment later, flames shot out. The 6 cannons spun at the same time, making clicking sounds. Rumbling noises shook the sky. One after another, the energy beams shot out. Hades Era's eyes shrank. He had a hard time blocking one of the energy beams. This time, there were 18 of them in a row. Because the cannons had spun 3 times, which meant they had fired 3 times this kind of attack, 18 of them exploding at the same time. The corners of Hades Era's mouth twitched. A moment later, his body shot out, stepping on the void as if he was going to cross the starry sky. However, 18 metal cannonballs soared through the void, shooting toward Nether King Erha at high speed. No matter how hard he tried to dodge, he couldn't avoid the energy beams. This kind of attack made Hades Era's scalp go numb. He could feel the metal puppets while locking on his body. It was a bit like a divine will, but it was more extreme. The energy beams were too fast. Hades Era knew he couldn't dodge them. He could only resist them. Hades held his halberd horizontally. The Hades armor on his body burst out with thousands of beams of light. Boom! Dazzling light shot up to the sky. 18 energy beams fell at the same time. Boom! 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 A terrifying explosion spread out in the sky. For a moment, the endless flames seemed to burn the entire starry sky. Terrible energy waves swept across the world. The flames exploded, clanging sounds echoed. Amidst the flames, Hades Era roared. Hades's halberd exploded, breaking into several pieces, falling rapidly toward Earth Prison. The Netherworld King's armor had long since been shattered and scattered in the void. Hades Era was soaked in blood. His mouth clenched the spicy strip, and his body helplessly fell in the void. He seemed to fall from tens of thousands of meters in the sky. Something flashed. The metal puppet emerged instantly. Reaching out its hand, a metal net shot out. After spreading, it caught Hades' era as if it was catching a fish. Beep, beep, beep. The metal puppet's mechanical eyes continued to scan Earth Prison. A virtual image emerged in its eyes. Then, the metal puppet grabbed Hades' era, who looked like a fish that couldn't break free from its shackles. Then, it soared into the sky. Earth Prison, 10,000 meters in the sky. A black dot rapidly fell from the sky. In just a blink of an eye, it whizzed past. He smashed into the ground, creating a deep crater in the ground. The broken pieces of Hades' halberd sank into the ground. Black smoke spread from them. In Earth Prison, many experts instantly sensed that, and their faces changed dramatically. In Hades' palace, Inglong, the Earth Prison overlord, widened his bloodshot eyes. The void-eye scepter in his hand flickered. Lord Hades is in danger. Inglong sucked in a breath of cold air. Acheron's little restaurant Hades Tenzang, who was gently placing a dish on the table, paused. The gentle smile on his face disappeared instantly, leaving only coldness. Lying under the path understanding tree, the black puppy opened its eyes, making a sound of surprise. Great Sage Acheron reached out his chopsticks to pick up the steaming hot fish with pickled cabbage and chili. The moment a white, crystal fish slice was about to enter his mouth, he squeezed it, causing it to fall into his bowl. In the kitchen, Bufong, who was cooking, furrowed his brows. He seemed to be puzzled and doubtful. At this moment, they all sensed an unusual aura. This aura made their faces turn incomparably serious. In front of the silver warship, the man took a sip of the orange juice with a gentle smile on his face. All of a sudden, his mind flickered. He turned his head to look at the nether prison. There, a hazy black mist emerged. That black mist floated with faintly discernible dog paws moving, dashing toward the silver warship. Chapter 1372. The man on the silver warship narrowed his eyes as he looked at the black fog that was approaching at high speed. From it, he sensed a faint fluctuation of the power of law. It was not strong, but it was, after all, the power of law. This meant that the expert in the black fog should be a demigod or a god. The man held a transparent glass in his hand, which was filled with orange juice. He took a sip of the orange juice and felt the sweet orange juice flowing through his throat. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. A god? That should be impossible. How could there be a god in such a remote place? At most, it's a demigod. The corner of the man's mouth twitched. Then, he rose from his chair, took the glass of orange juice, and walked to the mast on the deck of the warship. With one hand on the mast, he stared straight at the black fog in the distance. The black fog surged slowly and finally hovered in front of the silver warship. "I'm Di Ting, the lord of the great netherworld." A mellow voice came from the black fog, which made those who heard it feel like a spring breeze. "Di Ting? That a good name. I'm Alpha, the lord of the silver warship. Nice to meet you," the man said softly with a smile. His name was Alpha, a man who wandered the starry sky and traveled among the stars. I once heard an ancient saying of a civilization. It goes like this: "It's a pleasure to have a friend come from afar. You should welcome me, don't you?" Alpha chuckled. Looking at Di Ting in the black fog, he drank the orange juice in one gulp. "Wandering the starry sky? You don't have to be so polite. After all, you are an emissary sent by the divine dynasty." Di Ting's voice was still mellow. Alpha's pupils constricted. He did not expect Di Ting to say such a thing and expose his identity with just one sentence. "Oh, you're an interesting native. Well, I'll tell you the truth. Someone told me about this place, so I came. I didn't expect to find a newly formed great world." Alpha chuckled. "You've barely formed this great world. I can't believe there are two other small worlds that are above it." In the black fog, Di Ting's eyes seemed to flicker. "Did someone tell me about this place?" "Sure enough," Di Ting murmured. Alpha did not seem to be in the mood to talk to Di Ting. After saying a few words, he changed the topic. "Your macro world should have been reported to the law of the universe, right? Since it has been reported to the law of the universe, it has been recorded in the Divine Imperial Court and has become a member of the Divine Imperial Court. In that case, I won't make things difficult for you. After a while, there should be an ambassador from the Divine Imperial Court coming to take charge of your macro world. But before that, you'd better please me. After all, it's not easy to talk to the Divine Dynasty's border ambassador. Alpha's eyes revealed a glint as he spoke to Truth Listener. The Harkin's eyes flashed again. Buzz in the distance. One puppet after another was charging over. Oh, my little darlings are back. Alpha smiled on the warship and looked into the distance. In that area, numerous metal puppets were shooting towards Nietion like streaks of white smoke from their backs. Soon, it hovered above the silver warship. The Harkin narrowed its eyes. He looked at those metal puppets and found that each of them was holding a metal net in their hands. There were many experts he was familiar with caught in the net. There was a hint of anger in D-Ting's voice. This guy has gone too far. The Lord of the Winged Man Valley, the great Buddha of the West Little Buddhism realm, and the Realm Lord of the Wandering Soul realm were the leaders of the small worlds under the great netherworld. I can't believe that these experts have been captured by this guy. Is he trying to intimidate me? The people of the Divine Imperial Court are really unreasonable. Suddenly, D-Ting's pupils constricted as he saw a familiar figure. Bathed in blood, the figure lay in a sorry state in the metal net. Hades, Era? Even he is captured? That gave D-Ting pause. Did this guy go to Earth prison? Alpha gave a soft cry of surprise. He focused his eyes and looked into the distance. There a metal puppet was staggering back, looking very miserable. That made Alpha a little angry. Half of the puppet's body had been whipped to pieces, and its skin was covered with cracks. If its core had not been operating well, it would have exploded in the starry sky. The puppet staggered and flew back. Alpha took a step forward and looked at it with a pained expression. Suddenly, the metal puppet's mechanical eyes flickered. Suddenly, a terrible energy burst out of its body. There was a loud bang. The explosion exploded in the starry sky. Alpha, who had just taken 2 steps forward, was instantly enveloped by the explosion. D-Ting didn't move. If Alpha was really killed, he would only clap his hands and cheer. The shockwave of the explosion was very violent. It exploded over the silver warship. In an instant, Alpha was enveloped in flames. Such an explosion would have blown an ordinary 9-revolution great sage to pieces. Damn it, suddenly a gust of wind blew past. The flames dissipated in an instant, and the broken parts fell all over the ground. The warship was bombarded by the explosion, but it was unscathed. Alpha stood in the center of the explosion, holding a leaf in his hand. Terrible energy kept surging over his body, which blocked the power of the explosion. His eyes were cold and ruthless. The energy surged, and the leaf was burned to ashes. Who is it? How dare you destroy my little treasure? Alpha's face was as cold as ice. His metal puppet was destroyed in such a remote place. These natives. It seems that I have no choice but to be ruthless. Picking up the metal plate, Bu Fong's gaze swept over it. With just a glance, he locked onto his exploded metal puppet. It was the metal puppet that was heading to the so-called immortal cooking realm. The information about the Heaven Chief realm was also projected on the plate. A small world made of chefs. How dare such a trashy small world destroy my metal puppet? You're courting death. Alpha's oppressive aura was extremely terrible. In the distance, D-Ting was very vigilant. The pressure emanating from Alpha made him shudder. Alpha was also a demigod expert. He was even a veteran demigod, who was even stronger than him. You can get out of here now. Also, if you want to redeem your subordinates, you'll have to exchange them with the good stuff in your great world. If I'm satisfied, I'll let them go. If not, I'll feed them to my pets. Alpha said coldly. Then he flicked his sleeve. A terrible wave rushed toward D-Ting. D-Ting's eyes narrowed. A white dog paw emerged from the black mist and slapped out. It collided with the terrible wave, causing a rumbling sound to echo out. The next moment, D-Ting turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Sure enough, The people from the great world have come with ill intentions. Earth prison. Inglong prison overlord took the broken pieces of Hades's halberd out of the rubble. His face was trembling violently. His Excellency Hades. What happened? A look of worry emerged in Inglong prison overlord's cloudy eyes. He put away the broken pieces of Hades's halberd and sped toward Acheron City. At the entrance of the restaurant, the business was over. Bufong stood in front of the door, wiping his hands. Great sage Acheron, Hades Tenzang, and the others stood in front of the restaurant, frowning. They looked up at the sky as if they wanted to see through it. I have a bad feeling about this, Hades Tenzang said. Great sage Acheron also kept nodding. They had all sensed the formidable aura just now. Hades' era had gone to deal with it, but he had not returned yet. It seemed that he was in danger. Suddenly, their eyes narrowed. In the distance, a silhouette flew through the air at high speed. It was none other than Prison Overlord Inglong. Prison Overlord Inglong landed. His face was extremely cold and solemn, as if it could drip water. His Excellency Tian Song. Something bad has happened. Inglong Prison Overlord said solemnly. He reached out a hand, which was holding a broken piece of Hades's halberd. Tian Song's eyes shone brightly. Those who hurt my son will be killed without mercy. Full of killing intent, Hades Tenzang took a step forward, soared into the sky, turned into a stream of light, and rushed into the battlefield of the stars. But as soon as he entered the battlefield, all that was left was the smoke of war. Sensing the smoke, Hades Tenzang turned his eyes in the direction where the metal puppet had disappeared. Nether prison? Is D Ting finally going to stir up trouble again? Hades Tenzang took a deep breath, his eyes flashing with killing intent. Then, he sped away and landed in front of the restaurant. Bufong curled up in a chair and looked curiously at Tian Song. Tian Song told them about his speculation. Impossible. Prison Overlord Inglong shook his head. Nether Prison has just completed the transformation into a great world, so it's impossible for them to attack Earth Prison. They don't have that kind of ability. After all, they have just become a great world, and their foundation is not stable. If they rashly start a war, it could easily cause the great world to collapse again. The loss outweighs the gain, Prison Overlord Inglong said. He had learned all this. I'll go to Nether Prison. I don't think things are that simple this time. Suddenly, a gentle and magnetic voice rang out. Then Lord Go, who was lying under the path understanding tree, walked out with his elegant cat-like steps. After glancing around, he yawned. At the demigod level, Lord Go seemed to know something, but he didn't say it. Bufong and the others didn't say anything. Hades Tenzang, on the other hand, nodded deeply at Lord Go. I'm counting on you, Tian Song said. Lord Go waved his paw. No problem. Bufong boy, remember to cook a hot sweet and sour dragon ribs for Lord Go. Lord Go said. As soon as he finished speaking, with a swipe of his paw, he tore open the canopy of the sky and strode forward with graceful cat-like steps. With his chubby body covered in dog meat, he stepped into the canopy. The crack healed. The people present looked at each other speechlessly. They didn't know if Hades' era was dead or alive, so they didn't know what to say. Suddenly, a clear sound of footsteps rang out. All the people present couldn't help but raise their heads and look into the distance. There, they saw a figure walking slowly toward them. It was a beautiful figure. Bufong's eyes narrowed when he saw the figure. City Lord Mingqi? Looking at Mingqi, Bufong couldn't help but ask skeptically, shouldn't she be in the Heaven Chief realm? Coming from a distance, she soon arrived in front of Acheron's restaurant. City Lord Meng Qi slightly bowed to the people present. Meng Qi's eyes were complicated as she looked at Bufong. Then, her voice was like a piece of jade falling on a plate. The Realm Lord sent me here. He has something to show you. Hades Tenzang furrowed his brows, looking at Meng Qi. Meng Qi didn't say anything more. She reached out her hand, which was as white as jade. In her palm, there was a jade talisman. As soon as the immortal energy entered the talisman, the quiet jade talisman changed Buzz, an image suddenly floated above the jade stone. It was a battle. A metal puppet was hovering outside the Heaven Chief realm, trying to scan the Heaven Chief realm. However, it was sensed by the Heaven Tree. At the same time, the Heaven Tree whipped out its branches and bombarded the puppet. To everyone's surprise, the puppet began to fight back. Although it was still destroyed by the whip of the immortal tree in the end, the strength of the metal puppet gave off an extremely terrifying feeling. Is Nether Puppeteer Patriarch making a comeback? Great Sage Acheron's eyes widened. However, Ming-Chi just shook her head. The image in the jade talisman changed again. This time, it showed the West Little Buddhism realm. A great Buddha was seriously wounded by the metal puppet's cannons. Then, a metal net fell and captured him. At the same time, the image changed to the Winged Man Valley, the Wandering Soul Realm, the Vajra Realm, and so on. The hearts of Tian Song and the others shrank. Sure enough, a familiar figure finally appeared in the image. It was none other than Hades' Era. It showed the battle between Era and the metal puppet. The result made them fall silent. They watched as Era's Hades halberd was destroyed, his Hades armor was shattered, and he was bathed in blood. Killing intent burst out of Tian Song's eyes. I've seen the metal puppet. It's indeed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. Tian Song clenched his fists. A terrible aura emanated from him, causing the surrounding heaven and earth to tremble. No, it's not Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, Ming-Chi indifferently shook her head. His Excellency Realm Lord seems to know something is wrong, so he investigated it. Ming-Chi continued. As soon as she finished speaking, the image in the jade talisman changed again. This time, it showed a creepy silver warship hovering in the starry sky. At the top of the warship, a man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Suddenly, the man in the image jerked his head around. His eyes moved as if he was staring at Bufong and the others outside the image. It was as if he could see them through the image. The next moment, the corners of the man's mouth curved upward slightly. Looking at the crowd, his eyes filled with contempt and disdain. Hovering around him were figures wrapped in metal nets, looking like prey. Chapter 1373. I can't believe someone is spying on me. Alpha cast a glance at the empty void, and the corners of his lips curled up into a mocking and disdainful smile. He naturally didn't care about those who were hiding in a corner and peeping at him. Besides, given his identity as the Divine Dynasty's emissary, he didn't care about it all. The silver warship came from the Divine Dynasty. It was extremely tough, and its offensive methods were extremely powerful. Alpha never thought that someone in this remote and backward place could kill him while he was under the protection of the warship. Besides, Alpha wasn't weak either. The two ends of the silver warship split into two. Then, the metal puppets grabbed the metal nets and opened them. The natives caught by the puppets fell through the nets and into the prison under the warship. After the metal puppets were done, they all stood motionlessly on the battleship, as straight as statues. Alpha clasped his hands behind his back. The metal door opened from the bottom up. Then he stepped through it and went inside. After walking down the spiral stairs, he came to the huge and spacious interior of the warship. He had spent a lot of money to buy this warship. Although the exterior had changed, the interior was extremely luxurious. It gave off the feeling of a divine warship used by the Divine Dynasty's high-ranking officials. He sat down at the wooden dining table. This was the moment he enjoyed the most every day. He raised his hands and clapped them together, producing a loud clapping sound. Buzz! A moment later, the metal door opened. A burly figure walked up from beneath the warship. It's time for dinner. I wonder what delicacy Lord Alpha would like to taste this time. A burly man in a chef's robe and a chef's hat said respectfully. The corners of Alpha's mouth curved into a smile. At the thought that he would soon be able to taste delicious food, the gloom of the destruction of the metal puppets faded a lot. What delicacies do we have today? Alpha said with a smile. The burly man straightened up. He was more than 2 meters tall, and his head almost touched the ceiling. However, he didn't care. He just handed a small notebook to Alpha. Today's main dish is 3 dishes. The first is the secret true dragon steak. The second is the immortal fruit salad. And the third is the honey roasted pork leg. The muscular man said. He was the warship's chef, specially recruited by Alpha from the Divine Dynasty. His cooking skills were pretty good. Although he was not famous in the Divine Dynasty, he was a chef in a restaurant before he came to the warship. Alpha looked at the menu and pondered for a long time. Sometimes, choosing delicacies was also a kind of torture. After all, humans were greedy, and they all wanted to eat. Let's have a secret true dragon steak today. I remember that dragon steak is your specialty, right, Zhuang? Zhuang nodded and puffed out his chest confidently. However, he bumped into the ceiling, which stunned him. Oh, make one more today. I remember I said I would reward you. Alpha seemed to have thought of something and said to Zhuang in a serious tone. Zhuang nodded. He took an empty cup and poured Alpha a glass of orange juice, then turned and walked toward the warship's kitchen. Alpha, on the other hand, was sitting on a chair and fiddling with the metal plate. The Heaven Chief realm, a small world made up of chefs. Interesting. One of my favorite things in life is eating. This world of chefs suits me very well. It's time for me to go there and ask Zhuang to bring back a few chefs. Also, I'm tired of the warship's menu. Although Zhuang's cooking is delicious, I'm tired of eating every day. I hope this world of chefs won't disappoint me. Nether Prison, Lord Dog crossed the void, the fat on his entire body jiggling. His aura was unleashed without restraint, so terrible that it almost blotted out the sky. A moment later, a figure shrouded in black mist emerged and hovered in front of Lord Go. Ting looked indifferently at Lord Go, and Lord Go looked back at him. This was the second meeting between the two dogs. The last time they met was 9 years ago. No one knew what they were talking about. But this time, the two dogs did not fight, and the atmosphere was quite harmonious. Nether Prison. The jade talisman in Mengqi's hand shattered. It was broken by the man in the image, and white smoke rose from it. Bufang narrowed his eyes and felt a burst of pressure. He felt a burst of pressure. That's right, the pressure that person gave him was really huge. It was a kind of mental suppression. Without a doubt, the strength of the man in the image was incomparably terrifying. Is little Ha taken away by that man? He's not Ting's man. Why did he take so many people? Bufang asked, frowning. The people present did not know much about it. Tian Tsang clenched his fists, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. That man is very strong, just like Ting. When did Nether Prison produce such an expert? Tian Tsang asked. Everyone was puzzled. After a moment of silence, Mengqi finally spoke. Her voice was pleasant to the ear. His Excellency Realm Lord asked me to tell you that a crisis is coming and that you should take care of yourselves. Also, he asked Ownerbu to return to the Heaven Chief Realm to discuss something important. Mengqi said. Everyone was slightly taken aback when they heard that. Bufang nodded. He knew that it might not be the Realm Lord Dit's intention, but the Heaven Trees. The Heaven Tree in the Heaven Chief Realm was very mysterious, but it was different from the Heaven Tree in his Heaven and Earth farmland. The Heaven Chief Realm's Heaven Tree's intelligence was much more mature than the Heaven Tree in his Heaven and Earth farmland. Tian Tsang and the others narrowed their eyes. Because they were pressed for time, Bufang did not ask Mengqi to stay in the restaurant for dinner. After closing the restaurant's door, Bufang hung a closed sign on the door. He was already familiar with this behavior. Then, Bufang left the restaurant with you, Little Hu, and Hua. Tian Tsang stood in front of the restaurant with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes flickering. Mengqi boarded the Netherworld ship, which tore through the void and flew away. Soon, they left Earth Prison and headed for the Heaven Chief Realm. When Hades Tenzang saw Bufang leave, his eyes flashed. You dare to hurt my son. Even if that battleship is a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, I have to go there. Hades Tenzang's eyes were still cold. He grabbed the fragments of Hades' halberd that Inglong Prison Overlord had collected. His mind flickered. The The fragments of Hades's halberd glowed and began to slowly fuse, eventually turning back into Hades's halberd. He glanced at Inglong Prison Overlord and many experts from Earth Prison's aristocratic families. Tian Song didn't say anything. With a single step, he soared into the sky, disappearing into the horizon and charging into the clouds. He arrived in the starry sky. A jet of air shot out from his back. Then, he turned into a beam of light and sped into the distance. Holding the Hades's halberd in one hand, a terrible, murderous aura swept across heaven and earth. The silver battleship hovered in front of Nether Prison. Tian Song was familiar with it. After all, he had a glorious time in Nether Prison. Before long, he arrived in the boundless starry sky outside Nether Prison. Looking at the huge silver battleship, which exuded a terrible pressure, Hades Tenzang's eyes grew colder and colder. Little Ha, is he in there? Don't worry. I'm coming to save you. Raising his chin slightly, Hades Tenzang took a deep breath, then turned into a beam of light and sped away. Everything went well. The silver battleship didn't have any defensive measures. Hades Tenzang landed on the battleship in a flash. What he stepped on was actually a little soft. However, there was also a bit of firmness in this softness. There was no doubt that the material of the battleship was a divine item. Inside the battleship, the metal door opened. A Zhuang's burly figure emerged. He was holding a huge plate in his hand, which was covered with a round lid. Alpha was already sitting solemnly at the wooden table. A white cloth was tucked into his collar, making him look elegant and noble. With one hand behind his back, A Zhuang bowed slightly, his face full of respect. Sir, the secret true dragon steak you ordered is ready. Please have a taste. Please have a taste, A Zhuang said. After A Zhuang said that, he held a silver curved cup and poured the juice in the cup onto the true dragon steak, causing it to sizzle. A rich aroma spread and lingered in the room. It smells so good. The taste of pure, true dragon steak is intoxicating. A smile came over Alpha's face. Grabbing the knife and fork, he used the knife to poke at the juice that was poured onto the surface of the papillion steak, causing the juice to become even more sparkling and translucent. The juice seeped into the dragon meat, causing the fragrance to become even more intense. He cut a piece of meat and put it into his mouth with a fork. Alpha narrowed his eyes. Delicious. A Zhuang, your skills have improved again. I was right to spend so much money on you. Alpha was very happy. The metal door opened. The woman in revealing clothes came in leisurely. Her eyes were lifeless. She sat at the table in a daze. A Zhuang placed a small plate in front of her and opened it. There was also a small dragon steak inside. Have my pets been fed? Alpha cut a piece of glistening dragon meat and put it in his mouth. He wiped his mouth with the cloth in front of his chest. The woman nodded woodenly. Very good. Let's eat. This meal is a reward for you, Alpha said with a smile. The woman's eyes lit up at the mention of food. A Zhuang retreated and left the room. Only the quiet sound of eating and the scraping sound of the knife cutting the plate could be heard. Suddenly, Alpha moved in unison. He raised an eyebrow. A little bug wants to break into my battleship? Really, it's disturbing my appetite. Alpha sighed softly. His divine sense surged. Instantly, it spread out of the battleship. After doing all that, Alpha continued to elegantly cut the dragon meat with his knife and fork, eating it. As for the woman sitting next to him, her movements were neither fast nor slow. She was also very elegant. However, when she put the dragon meat in her mouth, she chewed it a little faster. It showed that her desire for food was not calm. Hades Tenzang held the Hades halberd in one hand as he slowly walked on the deck of the battleship. According to the image shown on the jade talisman, Little Huss was imprisoned in this battleship. Little Huss was locked up in this battleship. However, this battleship was truly humongous. Tian Song was a little surprised. He did not feel it from the image, but when he saw it in person and landed on the battleship, he realized how huge it was. It was almost as big as Acheron City. Of course, Hades Tenzang also knew that this was not the time to be surprised. The most important thing now was to rescue Era. He took a step forward. Tian Song narrowed his eyes. He raised his hand. A clanging sound rang out. A nozzle appeared on his arm. Buzz! A scarlet beam shot out of the nozzle toward the battleship's deck. It wanted to cut the deck open and escape. However, an invisible wave spread out. Tian Song seemed to sense something. His body suddenly moved to the side. Suddenly, a metal puppet thrust its spear at the spot where he was standing. Tian Song's eyes narrowed. The metal puppets also raised their heads. Their mechanical eyes collided with Tian Song's, glowing red. Boom! 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 The puppets woke up one by one. In the blink of an eye, they surrounded Hades' Tenzang. Terrible killing intent instantly enveloped Tian Song. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.